Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. A new year and a chance to prove to my wonderful and long-suffering neighbours that I've finally outgrown my difficult drone phase. Who am I kidding? I'm going to march my ever-loving derriere to Signal Sounds, and I'm going to buy the most texturally scintillating array of long-form exploratory tone equipment I can get for money. I'm going to point the speakers out the windows and bathe everything in a 5-mile radius in waveforms, whether they like it or not. And they mainly don't. I've a table full of everything ever made by Manico Labs. It's like the Swiss surrealist horror legend H.R. Giger and Emily Gillet got stuck in an elevator in Uruguay and decided to collaborate on a whole range of products, and the knobs have skulls on them. I'm sampling all that chaos into my new Kiviak Wo-Fi. It's a sampling weird granular keyboard thing where noise becomes tones, and it's like the grandchild of my Yamaha VSS. Yes, I was concerned I wouldn't have quite enough drone firepower, so I've added on the Direct CPM DS2. It's a whole semi-modular drone synth/Eurorack module from the folks making the modern Stylophone. I think they've had a very strong cup of tea, because this thing looks absolutely completely blinking cracking bonkers. It's going to fit in perfectly. And finally, I've got the Melbourne Roto Control, the incredible new affordable motorized knob controller with screens to control my computer and hardware and orchestrate all the channels of my magnum opus. 16 speakers pointed in every direction, up, down, outside, in. Yes, I really don't see eye to eye with my neighbours as regards my difficult drone project. But I'm pretty sure 5 solid days of gorgeous square waves through wave folders will bring them round. So if you're looking to be forcibly evicted by the council, visit signalsounds.com. That's signalsounds.com. Hello. It's January, officially the longest month in the universe, with 4,000 days, though it has ended by the time you have heard this, and we have in fact moved into February. Apologies for being a little bit late, but alas, or perhaps just as well, there is only one of me. And this month we are presenting, again, for the 7th time, a trip around the sun with beautiful man Tom Whitwell, who of course has released a brand new synthesizer in the last year since we spoke to him. And since this is a very long conversation and very meandering and interesting and discusses all manner of things about life, about work, what is the meaning of your working life? These are the questions that we get into with Tom. Then I'm not going to delay things. You've waited this long. Of course, I must mention that we have a Patreon. Patreon.com/Mylar Melodies. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help support future bleeps. Please consider hopping on. And many thanks to those who do. Let's get in our little sweet audio time machine and get ourselves to Tom's shed. Thanks. I mean, I listened to that Tape Notes podcast, and it is, you know, John, the guy who presents it, he's really good, you know?
Is he like NPR voice?
No, he's British, so he's like, but he's just very calm and measured and he goes in at the right moment to ask the question that needs to be asked, and then he holds back. And that, for me, is one of the lessons I've learned doing this podcast over now 7 years. This is the 7th time around the sun, is knowing how to frame a question succinctly and then shut up.
Yeah. Whenever you do radio interviews, as you just did then, you have the powerful silence that means they just carry on. It's the same actually for doing interviews for like customers. You just ask them a question, then you sit there staring at them.
Until they answer. or until they further elucidate. I mean, I'm filling the gap now because I feel that the gap needs to be filled. But it is true, if you hold back, people will just add more, won't they? I mean... So, hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Why We Bleep. This year, we're talking to Tom Whitwell. Tom, you've had a big year. A year ago, almost to the day, we were in this room and you were showing me a paper model of a synthesizer that is now a physical object that is behind you.
Yeah.
I have many questions to ask you about that, but I suppose, we have talked, obviously, there are other... Yeah. There's a video where I talk to you at length about this. You've done presentations about this thing. The thing is an amazing, gorgeous workshop synthesizer that is a complete small modular in a case that will be a good first synth for many people, and maybe all you need. But I suppose my question is, firstly, what have you learned in this experience of completing? You've finished a book, you called it.
Yeah.
So what did you learn?
I mean, it's a lot easier if you do it full time. I think that's the big change for me was, so last time we spoke, I was on sabbatical. I was working 2 days a month and was still kind of conceptually working for what I was working before. That finished in September. And after a lot of discussion and thinking, decided I wasn't going to do that. I was going to go full time, which is what I'm doing now. I am now Music Thing Modular. That is my job.
Shit.
That is what I do all day long. And that being able to absolutely say, right, today I'm going to spend 3 days worrying about a little corner of a design. How do I get this, bundle of capacitors and diodes right? Or more likely, how do I get this documentation right? Or how do I make a video that explains it to people? Or how do I plan a workshop? Or how do I go and meet people and talk to people who might be interested in it? Being able to have the full time to do that is just amazing. And
weirdly, those things take time.
Everything takes time.
But hang on. So you've gone full time. Tell me, I'm going to jump around here, but I was going to ask you generally on your reflections of work life. It's something that I think a lot about. I quit. I've literally just spent the last year as my first full year of being a self-employed person, making videos and making an okay living doing that. But what were your reflections? You left work. What do you think about work, I suppose? Why are you doing this then, not going back to your excellent job?
Yeah, I think when I started, and it was all happening, it was about a year ago when it was really starting to happen, and I'm sure I probably said this last time, the kind of move from I am making individual modules that fit into a big system, which means the audience is people who've spent $2,000, $3,000, more grand, and are deep in that world. If that's the entire audience, that felt like a quite small audience and a very specific kind of person to be talking to and to be thinking about. Once I started doing the workshop system, I thought this is actually very different from that. And I've said this to you before. It's not like it's a simple beginner system. It doesn't kind of hold your hand. But you can go to arbitrary person in the world and say to them, have a go on this, see what you make of this. And doing that retreat last year, where a bunch of people came, some of them were kind of super modular people, some of them were like a folk musician or a sort of film sound guy. They came, they sat down with them, they made sense of them, they used them. That, for me, suddenly felt much more exciting than selling individual kind of modules. And that was the thing that made me think, well, actually, there is a sort of bigger task. There is more to do here that's interesting.
Oh, you say you found a calling that is doing something broader.
Yeah, doing
has made
something
you realise this is what you should be doing.
With a broader audience felt like it was more something I could kind of commit to. Whereas I think at the very start of my retreat, so this was like a year and a half ago, at the start of my sabbatical, I was like, making these modules is is a kind of hobby, and it's nice, it's interesting, but I don't feel I can do that full time. Now I'm like, the idea of making things for different types of musicians and being able to spend all my time doing that felt really exciting and kind of fun.
Yeah.
I also just realized, I think, having spent that time doing it, I really, really enjoy a lot of the different parts of it. So that process when you're designing something, of the kind of technical challenges and the kind of human interface challenges and the prioritization and all of that stuff, I'm very happy to spend days and days and days doing that. You know, after, you know, if I'm designing a little chunk of something and I finish it and I send it off, that's a really rewarding thing. But then equally, the other things that come around it. So like there was a moment, obviously the moment when I kind of released the first batch and saw people buying them and then starting to use them was really nice. But things like when Surin played a gig, you know, not far from here in South London, with just a workshop system and an old Chaos pad, that was just an amazing thing to be standing there and seeing somebody doing something live in front of you with like a week's experience of it. He's not a modular person at all, particularly. Seeing that coming to life, hearing that in such a kind of direct, immediate thing was very different from, here's a video on Instagram of somebody who's got one of your modules and a bunch of other stuff, and it's cool, and that's nice as well.
Yeah.
And it was also different from like the most amazing things of like the Tom York story, when Tom York buys my thing and then sends me an email saying, oh, I've got it sitting on top of my piano and the Turing machine's playing these notes and I'm kind of improvising and singing along with it. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of tick. That's done now. I don't feel I need to sort of try and pursue famous musicians doing cool stuff with my stuff, because that's been done now. That's like...
Yeah. Okay,
tick.
I see what you mean.
And so, but for me, that idea of finding... I think there's something about finding... kind of helping people be more weird is a kind of summary of it. Seeing at the kind of retreat in Cornwall last year, the kind of power of saying to people, you can make something interesting and distinctive that nobody else has ever made. It's not, there's an awful lot of things in the world, so it's not an impossible thing to do that. But you have to try something and then kind of believe it's interesting and it's fun and that it's of value. And when they go through that kind of, you know, mirror, go through that door, there is something about that kind of unlocks something in somebody, the things that are the realm of possibilities open to somebody. That's a very pretentious way of putting it, but that sense of experimentation.
What you are talking about is you are basically saying these are the kinds of goals and activities that I want my devices to provoke people to explore.
Yeah.
So as you've said, like, and you've said this to me before, like, you know, when I asked you, like, what's the point of the workshop? You're like, well, it's a collection of elements, but really its role is to sort of provoke you to play an experiment, and to be like, what if I plug that? And you're saying that what you found most edifying is this that you see that you have successly provoked people.
Yeah, I think so.
Trying.
And it's really like there's a Discord with the people who have them at the moment, and they will. One of the comments that I find most kind of pleasing is where somebody says, "I would never have done this. I would never have patched like this." Like people, obviously, the early adopters are generally people who know modular and they know
that can be a curse though, because you think you know how to
exactly,
do it.
They know a path. And so I did this thing where I made a script to generate random patches. Did I talk about this last time?
Yeah, you've mentioned it. Yeah, book of 1,000 patches.
Yeah, and it now has found 60,000. And its rule is that's 2 to 8 patch cables. One patch cable patches are a little bit uninspiring when you look at them, although that's probably not true. And the logic is every module has to be patched to a module that is patched to an output.
Yeah.
So a bunch of patch cables in a thing that's not connected to anything is not valid, but anything else is valid. So a perfectly valid patch would be filter, no input, connected to the mixer.
Yeah.
Which you realise you can make sound
Self-resonant.
from. You turn the resonance up, and I just produced a system that made tens of thousands of these, and would occasionally post them up on the Discord, and people really kind of responded to that, and they were like, "I would never have tried this."
Yeah.
And the task I said, job one is make a sound. Job two is like any sound. Job two is make a different sound. So you have to kind of interact with it and say, okay, this makes a squeaking high-pitched sound. This one's a squeaking low-pitched sound. But when you've got 3 or 4 patch cables, you can often get a bit wider than that. And then the third task is add another patch cable to do something more kind of deliberate. And it's just so gratifying the way people are like, I would never have seen this. I would never have thought of this. I would never have tried it. And they will record what they're doing, they'll make something, and it's kind of, I just find that really interesting, that idea of unlocking a different way of doing it. I found when I was looking, I was playing with this and doing it, and I was looking at, I had one where it was a filter basically patched to an output with something going to one of the inputs, but I was like, this resonance control, I've always been like, resonance is something you have to be quite delicate with and gentle with, because it's a filter, and if you turn the resonance up too much, it's kind of interesting. Some things you have to be careful with it. When you're doing that, you're like, well, it just doesn't work if the resonance isn't turned up. It's a whole different, why am I thinking of this as a filter? Why am I thinking of this in that way? Why do I have this control that I'm like, I have to be careful with it? It completely kind of flipped the way I was thinking about it. Similarly, like, it's the way anything becomes an oscillator once you feed it back into itself, or you turn its speed up.
Anything's like an oscillator if you drive it hard enough.
And actually, quite a lot of things are filters if you really mess with them differently.
So hang on. So your MO, basically, I suppose this is the question of what next? Because if you're going to do this full time, do you need to keep designing things, and how? Many questions, but how do you make it a viable business? How is it a viable?
So it's a viable business if I carry on selling them as they are selling.
A certain rate.
I mean, it's a balance of supply and demand, obviously. So initially, demand wasn't particularly a problem. The first batch sold out in a week. Right now, supply is a problem because I've got to make some little tweaks and do the second batch, and then that will be a delay. So at the moment, you can't buy one. So supply is a problem, and that's kind of my fault because I'm tweaking stuff. And then it will be Thonk's fault because we'll be waiting for the order to come in. And then, so there's a basic kind of balancing supply and demand thing that will happen. And I can make a living by selling them like that.
Yeah.
But I think around it, doing that will also involve creating demand. So it will be, how do you explain this to people? How do you get this to different audiences? How do you, and the thing with the kind of computer part of it, because it has these little program cards, that's another incredibly gratifying people, is that a subset of the people with them are like, I want to make stuff.
Yeah.
And amazing stuff has already been made for them. There was Chris's advent calendar.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
Where every day from the 1st to the 25th of December, he designed a new card in this amazing kind of ecosystem, so you can build these cards in multiple.
They're like dual cards. So you can go to a website and you can say, I want 2 delays.
Yeah.
Because it can do 2 things at once. Or I can want a delay and a bit shifter or whatever weird thing.
Delay and what's the one that was really good? There's a chords and delay, which is kind of instant sort of dub techno.
Yeah, amazing.
But then there's lots of other people doing similar kind of wild things. So there will be a path over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years of helping those get an audience, helping those get into the world. Because I made a thing, I put it on GitHub, I mentioned it in a Discord, is not going to get that kind of creativity to the audience it needs to get. So it's, how do I explain that to people? How do I get an audience for those? How do I help that kind of ecosystem so that the people making them get value from them, both kind of emotional value because people are using them, but also some money value, because I think
You're the sort of...
hobbies with benefits is always quite a good way to go.
I suppose that's my concern, is that you have effectively got a hobby with benefits, but maybe not. If you've got a higher value thing to sell, and your job is now to be the kind of shepherd that's like, here's how to sort of celebrate and tell people about how to use this thing in lots of different ways. And to get people tweaking and trying... Because it is like the workshop is kind of... It is the modular quest, because to understand and work with a workshop is to basically perhaps take your first steps into modular synthesis in a way. And there's a lot of people, as anyone who's like listening to this, who's like tried to build or even considered building a modular synth, like the biggest and most horrendous part of it is that initial, what on earth do I buy? And people not only can spend multiple years, but can spend the entire time they would be making music buying shit.
Which was your video the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the other thing that I kind of didn't really think about beforehand, but there's not really any buying to do in this
There's one
system.
buying.
There's one, but
buying.
But the idea that everyone has the same thing makes it really fun, because somebody comes on and goes, like, I mean, the thing that's amazing for me as well is just noticing things that I never noticed. So as part of his advent calendar, one of arguably the less exciting things he designed was an attenuator. So like whatever, the 12th of December or something was 2 attenuators with a knob to do that. As he was writing, he said, of course, there are already 2 attenuators in the workshop system. And I was like, are there?
The filter?
No.
The mixer?
The blend control on the stomp box.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's a perfect. It goes the other way, but it's a completely straightforward.
If there's nothing.
Completely straightforward attenuator.
Yeah.
Which I now use all the time. I was like, there is a bit of a problem. It doesn't have an attenuator.
Eureka.
But then there's also an attenuverter, which is I think it's one of these particular buttons. It works particularly well. Pick one of the buttons on voltages. You take the voltage output into the ring mod.
Yeah.
And that then gives you a voltage that goes from sort of minus something to plus something when you turn the little knob. Yeah, and that causes the ring mod
to open or close.
To attenuate it.
Oh, to invert.
Yeah, it inverts it, because that's what the ring mod's doing.
Yeah,
and then, and I was like, this is amazing when people are finding things that I just didn't know, and finding different ways of using it, different ways of making sense of it. So I think there's a lot to be done with that.
But like, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm curious about your journey now. Is like and how you make it satisfying for yourself. But sounds like you're saying is this fact that you have the opportunity to basically get people into modular synth in a way that's gratifying, wholesome, and contained and achievable, and that is a really good goal. That's a great goal, because it will bring people in. That is that thing of what's going to bring people in.
But I also don't know quite where it leads them to, because my goal, I think, is to lead them to weirdness.
Weirdness.
Is there an easy way to explain it? Just like a wider, because that's the experience I had when I got into modular, was I started listening to completely different types of music, thinking about music very differently, thinking about sound very differently. And that didn't necessarily mean modular. It might mean like tomorrow night, I'm very excited because I am going to see the recreation of Luigi Rossello's Intonamori.
Okay, at last.
You know about this? So this is 1911, pre-World War One, Italian modernists. There's this amazing picture which you will have seen, black and white picture of a sharp-dressed Italian 1910 person with these boxes, big wooden boxes with kind of cones coming out the front. And these were the futurists in the kind of Zang Tum Tum like people in Italy, wanted to make weird noises. Obviously there was not weird noises to be had. They invented these big wooden boxes that I think are a bit like kind of hurdy-gurdy type mechanisms. They have kind of wheels and maybe strings or something, but they just make weird noise, and they have like levers and things. They all got destroyed in World War II, the actual original ones. In, I think, the late 90s, somebody recreated them. And they are playing for the London Contemporary Music Festival tomorrow night at Conway Hall. And
is there going to be a noise table that they're on? Just a small rickety
it's
table.
Mad. It's like, because they're enormous. They're the size of like, big chunky boxes, in different sizes, and they seem to have like, I don't quite know. They all have like big crude wooden levers on them that do stuff. Like they might push the things against the strings or pull them back. Okay. They're completely mechanical.
Can you describe the sound?
You
make the sound with your mouth.
It sounds like kind of grinding against strings. That sort of. There's a lot of. I'd say grinding is a good sound.
Grinding.
There's a lot of grinding.
Okay.
And I have to say, every time I've listened to different things from it, it all does seem to sound kind of the same sort of thing. But I haven't listened to much detail.
How long does the performance last?
Well, this is the thing. I'm going with some other people. And the guy who organised it sent out the running order. And the running order is like about 20, 25 pieces. Okay. And somebody was like, it's either going to be 30 minutes or 6 hours long.
Yeah. Is there an intermission where you can gently
I think there is intermission.
Have a gin and tonic and leave?
We're not going to leave. It's a big thing. I mean, I have genuinely been wanting to see this thing. I've known about this thing for years. Been wanting to see it for a very long time, and now I can. I want to spread that kind of level of weirdness interest to a wider population.
And why do you want to spread weirdness interest?
Because I think it's good for you.
It's good to be weird because you...
And it's not... Weird is obviously the wrong word.
Expand your horizons.
Just really expanding your horizons.
The boundaries of what music can be.
Boundaries of what's possible and what is... But also I think there's that thing... Did I talk last time about the bad dancing? Have I talked to you about bad dancing? I might have spoken to you when we were talking.
As a middle-aged man, that's sort of generally a topic. But yeah, I don't know.
This guy, Rind Eckert, who I met, I might have told this story before, but he teaches dancing to like art students or something. And he's a singer and a kind of theatre person. But the way he teaches dancing is he says to the whole group, well, you've got to dance badly. They stand up and they try things. And then he will pick out somebody who is dancing in a particularly distinctive way.
Badly.
Not attempting to dance well, but in some distinctive way of moving. And he'll be like, right, let's now give this person feedback, help them see what they're doing. And then he parameterizes it. So he says, right, you're moving this way, now move 200% in that way. And they're like, even more so. And then he's like, now move 80%, now move 50%, now move 10% like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, at that point, they've got a distinctive thing that is unique to them, that is probably basically kind of comfortable to them. Their body can do it because they're doing it, and they can control it. And at that point, you can start to compose with that. You can start to use it. You can create something with it. You can say, let's do something where it starts small and grows to big, or let's do something the other way. And I thought that idea of taking something that you can do and something that is kind of comfortable, but also something that is distinctive. It's not like you're not trying to do something else. You're not trying to create something else. You're not trying to sound like something else. You're not trying to do fancy ballet or something. But you've created something that is distinctive and is you. I thought that's such an interesting kind of notion.
And you rein it in to make it more
so you can control
palatable.
Well, no, it's just so you can control it.
Yes.
Because you can't just... It's like if you're doing it with an instrument. Like I can go to a piano and go...
Yeah, but you can't do it.
That's an interesting thing, but it doesn't... I have to be able to then do something with that.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, but yeah, if I was able to throw my hand on it and gradually go up and down in volume very accurately and controllably, you could do something interesting with that. Or if I was able to do that, but also that, and kind of control it, that's something you could compose with. It wouldn't be, melodic.
Yeah.
But you could imagine an interesting and original. It's not the same as trying to do what you've seen somebody else trying to do something before.
It feels like quite a scientific way to think about composing music, but there's nothing wrong with that.
I think it's explaining something you do intuitively, maybe.
Exactly. Because the alternative is do it intuitively and not really have words to describe what you're doing.
But also, you do it intuitively, you feel like you're wrong, or you're or you do what you want the outcome to be, and you're constantly comparing yourself to someone else. So when I kind of made music, which I really never do now, but when I kind of recorded things, I would always listen and go, well, it's not as good as anything else, any piece of music. It really doesn't sound as good as anything on Remain in Light. It's just no good.
Then it's not worth it.
What am I doing? I'm wasting my time. And that is obviously a really kind of pointless way to go about your life. You wouldn't do anything if you're comparing with that.
So you're saying that you basically, by approaching it in this way, you have a framework to push your boundaries, but in a way that is controllable. So you feel you have ownership.
Well,
or is it just that you're giving permission?
You
just need permission to act a certain way. Is that
I
what you're
think
saying?
the control part is just because this isn't just doing stuff that's mad. If you're going to make a performance out of something, or you're gonna make something, you do need to be able to control what you're doing. You need to be able to repeat it. You need to be able to do it big and do it small.
Be able to repeat it?
Well, if the kind of thing I'm talking about is not like super far out, like Wiles performance. It's just like the other way Rian, when I spoke to him, explained it, was he was talking about also in the context of just learning any instrument. So when I spoke to him, he was late on the call because he'd just been lent a tabla by a friend of his.
Yeah.
And so he has this tabla. And as I would be if I had a tabla in the room, I'd be like, oh, I love tabla music. I've listened to music that has tablas on it and it's great. And what I'm thinking of is somebody who's probably been learning to play the tabla for about 20 years and comes from a like multi-thousand-year-old Indian tradition. So I can try and sound like that person and do tabla like a tabla. Or he's like, I have this object. What can I do with the object? I can hit it with a stick. I can, turn it upside down. I can whatever. And then if I find something I think is interesting, I need to work out how to use that. So I'll need to be able to, like, I can hit a tabla with a stick is not interesting. But if I hit it with a stick with different angles or different velocity or whatever it is, I can make a range of interesting different sounds from it.
Yeah.
Then I've got something that's not working in a kind of convention. It's not working in an existing tradition. It's not pretending to be something else. I mean, it's like...
Well, it just sounds... As you apply that same philosophy to workshop, as you did from your workshop, is that you are simply giving people a framework to learn how to use a modular synthesizer in lots of different ways. Like, these are ways to use it.
In that kind of brainino-y way of like, you have to learn how not to use it.
Yeah.
I
should say that's not a bad thing. That's literally the greatest thing.
No, it is that, but
it's also
giving people the confidence that when it produces something weird or something unexpected, what do I do with that? Rather than going, this doesn't sound like I was expecting it to sound, or this doesn't sound like a record I know, or this doesn't sound like
that is a skill.
A 303.
Mr. Aphex Twin is very good at, like, there are sounds in his records. I was like, how have you A, achieved this sound, and B, come up with a composition that uses it so skillfully?
It's exactly that. And the first part shouldn't be terribly difficult.
Yeah,
because
if you have
modular synth makes a lot of weird noises, but you have to go into it with that spirit of trying to find something weird with it. Otherwise, like I remember like patching things up on this, and I was like, that's fine, but that is the Turing Machine demo video from 12 years ago.
No, is it? Yeah.
It's totally different setup, but it's the same thing.
It also reminds me of a common thing people say with presets on synths, where they're like, let's do all the presets on this thing, and none of them are sounds that you'd ever use in a record.
Yeah.
It's kind of a common refrain, which may or may not be true, but it sounds like you're saying you're trying to, you're seeing it as a goal of yours to basically use this as a way of giving people a way of finding their feet in a very odd and abstract kind of realm.
I think so.
And answering a question which is a very fundamental one. It's one I've actually thought about trying to make a video about, which is just, how do I know what to patch?
Yeah.
How do I, like, and people, I had this question when I was doing like stuff with Moog, where you'd like, here's the Mother 32, and people
Yeah.
were like, yeah, I get most of the Mother 32, but I look at the patch bay and I just don't understand what to connect to what.
And I wonder if
how are you going to bridge that?
Yeah, and I think it's also about what is the thing you're trying to do, because I think it's also quite interesting, the idea of it as any musical instrument as a thing that just sits there making sounds, and the idea that you might, in a room like this, have a system that's making a sound and it just sits there
Pootling away.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's there's a really interesting kind of sense that I got a friend who got some studio space, like in an artist studio kind of space. Some big building the council had, and they were like, we're looking for artists to go in here. So he got a space probably quite like this kind of room. And he was like, what am I going to do with it? And he's filled it with like old tape recorders, like, Volkers, like different objects that make a sound. And he's got a kind of recording setup in it. And he kind of sees it as a place you go and sit that is making interesting sounds. And it's almost like an environment. And I thought that's a really interesting kind of urge, that idea to create an environment that has sound in it,
like a little jungle, a garden.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing, which is different from I'm going to make a bass line.
Yeah,
but equally, I think that's the other thing from sort of conversations I've been having with, the other thing I've been trying to do this year is talk to modular or non-modular musicians and just listen to them talking about how they do things. And the way I do this is I take this in my bag with a little battery and some headphones and go to a cafe, and I'm like, have a go on this. And they haven't actually done it in Cafe Otto. So last time I went to a
they
meeting,
actually serve coffee in Cafe Otto.
they do.
It is a cafe.
Last time I went to Cafe Otto, I had a meeting with somebody there, and somebody was tuning the piano, and it was hilarious because it sounded a lot like a normal night at Cafe Otto. So like, we're getting this free. But no, I'll go sit there, and somebody will, the person will sit there just playing with it, and I will just be, reading my phone and looking over and going, yeah, you kind of know what you're doing. But their reactions are always really interesting. So somebody was, playing it for a while, and then he looks up and goes, this is really good for decoration. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, you make a track. He was like a dance producer. And you build it and you have the function of the thing, but then you need something else, something distinctive.
Uh-oh.
And
ornaments.
This is a thing that can make those ornaments. And, they've heard that a lot from people. Just somebody else I was talking to who produces indie bands and works with bands. The band comes in, they record their, bass and drums and vocals and guitars, and then he's like, what do we do now? And sometimes they get the percussion box out, or sometimes but he has two like modulars patched up. Basically, one's a kind of what's the Moog drum machine one? A DFAM.
DFAM.
It has something set up a bit like a DFAM, so it can make interesting rhythmic loops.
Yeah.
They play with that. They make some loops. They chop them,
Slide
fit
them
into
in,
the thing,
yeah.
and it adds something to it.
Is that, yeah?
So that idea of you don't need to be you don't need to be going and seeing people playing 1910s acoustic instruments, experimental instruments.
To find the answer, you just ask
But
people.
you go like, actually, I want a little sprinkle of something different, and this as a kind of relatively quick and interesting and distinctive and fun way of doing that sort of thing. Because it doesn't need to be like, I'm going to make loads of sick tracks with it. It might be like, made this weird noise and I sampled it, and 6 months later I put it behind something.
Deciding what to do with the modular is equally as important a thing as what to do with it when you've got it. That is like, why do I even own this object?
Yeah.
What role does it serve? It is tricky. Like, I definitely have sort of, like, I personally don't, I've not written a lot of music in the last sort of year and a bit. I have written some music, but like, I have not. And
since you got your studio set up?
Basically, since I got my studio set up, my job has been to like make demos of stuff and like generally make videos that help pay the bills. And so unfortunately, I'm in this ironic situation where I'm like, I have like sections of my studio that are islands that are partly set up. I've been getting into Atari STs because that's going to power a part of this setup. But it is a question of like, I myself have not used my modulars. Like, my live system has just kind of languished for most of the year, and I've not, it's a project where I'm like, I need to turn my attention to it. But this idea of like having specific intent is one of the hardest things. I think many people will look at modular synths initially as just, it's just a cool thing. It's a cool thing, and I want cool thing in my studio. It evokes images that they associate with, and all of that is kind of obvious, but it really is a question of devising a sort of a process by which any person can hone in on what it actually is that they're buying this stupid thing to do. Like, because that, and if you can do that role, I think that's really important. Like, it is,
or it's allowing them to feel happy with not having that.
The
idea of just like,
always.
I like spending half an hour
farting around,
making weird noises.
Making some noises because it just takes my mind off everything.
Because it's fun and nice. And I think probably when I first started, that was exactly what I was doing. I'd spend hours making weird noises. And I'm really interested in that idea of that's what I mean by almost as a kind of meditative thing. You know, it's a kind of make interesting sounds and just leave them. So one of my favourite things that somebody built as a card for the computer is a rain simulator.
Oh yeah.
And really
just makes the sound of rain.
Literally what he did was recorded rain in his backyard at 3 different intensities. So he has like gentle to hard. Then he did some very clever stuff that I don't understand that is essentially crossfading between them. And I think they loop seamlessly somehow.
Because there's not very much sample memory in that. Or does it just play, streams
it off the card?
Flipping streams it off the card, doesn't it?
It's got a 2 megabyte version and a 16 megabyte version.
Wow. Okay.
And
plenty of sampling time.
There you go. There's the...
I learned that Daft Punk made homework on a sampler with 2 megs of memory, so if it's good enough. Oh yeah, it actually says rain on it.
And you plug it in, and all it does is rain comes out.
Can you get it working? Get up here.
It's not. It
doesn't work.
No, it does work. I have to get the speakers plugged in.
Check. Are we still recording? Yes, we are recording. So it was just a very important check.
And so then the big knob just is the intensity of rain, kind of perfectly.
I love it.
It just has the effect. And then it has a couple of kind of LFO outs that are somehow related to... No, one is just the control of the top one. The knob position comes out as a voltage.
Oh.
Then another one's a kind of slightly rough LFO of it. And you just patch up a couple of oscillators. And I really enjoyed the kind of just... You know, you fade up the rain and the oscillators fade down, and then you fade down the rain. And just really nice as a kind of... you know, meditative object.
Can you imagine, like, you know, Yamaha coming out with the Yamaha rain synth? Like, I mean, this is the sort of the point of these sort of inconceivably niche, weird things. Like, it's impossible, but that's why it's great.
And you'll then like,
really want that card, the rain card. I won't forget.
You can download it from the Discord.
Is he going to sell it, or you know?
I don't know. That's another thing to think about next year.
How people do
work
that.
out. You know, several people have said to me, "Can I have the files so I can make?" Because there's the blank cards, like that one. That was
on the floor. Don't roll over.
There are endless broken cards and things. So that's
chewed up in your like.
There is the famous delay glitch card.
Yeah,
which is from Chris's thing, but there's the ones with logos on them. So like The True Machine, they're very pleasing, the ones. They're actually
yeah.
printed properly. So people have said, can I have the files so I can print some myself, which would be
make
great.
the cards.
Like actually, because you can make...
And just solder on the little thing.
Well, you just get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't cost... You could probably get like... I need to make some where you can make them slightly smaller numbers. But I get like 100 for like 60 quid or something. I mean, they're not especially expensive. So I think that's another thing to work. Also, because there's only 200 people gone, so the market's not huge at the moment. But the idea that you could make them and sell, I love the idea you sell them on like Instagram DMs or on Bandcamp or something as a kind of piece of merch.
A zine.
Yeah, exactly. That idea.
You reminded me earlier when you were talking about your weird acoustic things. I thought I would mention the best album that I heard all year, which was, so I thought a bit about you with this, is Maxime Denunc's Nacked Horn.
Is this the organ one?
Yeah.
Is it dance music played on an organ?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. It's from 2022, so it's not actually a 2024 record. But I discovered it in 2024 because a friend of mine got married in Salisbury Cathedral. And in Salisbury Cathedral, as in all cathedrals, they have big organs that are, the room is the synth.
Yeah.
And it's a long story, but basically the head organist really likes the beer that my family create.
Right.
My family are brewers.
I didn't realise your family was.
Yeah. So
Is that the Theakston family?
That's not technically who it is, but it's related. It's Black Sheep Brewery. So anyone who drinks Black Sheep Brewery, that is my family. And so he was wearing a Black Sheep Brewery. Like
the organist?
The head organist
dream.
at Salisbury Cathedral. And so they were getting married there, which is an incredible thing by itself. And they had Philip Glass played on the organ.
Wow.
Astonishing, obviously incredible. They had Aphex Twin, not actual Richard himself, but they played Aphex Twin's number 20 as they walked up the aisle. Got a tear in my eye. But the head organist was there, and I went up to him and was like, oh, Black Sheep, that's my family. We're friends now, right? And so, and he was like, do you want to come and see the organ?
Yeah.
And I was like, I literally don't want anything more in my life than to go up.
That's totally on my bucket list.
Yeah, I mean, it's like unbelievable because I've never gotten the chance to experience an organ up close. And many things. Firstly, he obviously shows, it's clever, it has stops, there's so much to say about the whole system and the way it works. The size of the largest pipe.
How old is the actual thing in the...
Well,
presumably they're not like 500 years old.
No, they're not 500. Like 500 years ago, I think organs were like all wood, and there are some really old ones. I watched a really good documentary, which is on Prime, I think, called Organ Stops, or Organ Stop, which is about the decommissioning of organs in like little regional churches. So in Durham, in like a Methodist chapel, there's actually a really interesting organ that's 100 years old, for example. And so what happens is these chapels close down and then the organs get literally skipped.
Yeah.
They get skipped because no one wants them. So this guy...
like 1990s modular synths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And synthes in the skip.
Yeah.
And so basically this guy, he has a little business where he comes in, he takes them out, he labels everything.
Yeah.
And then he has a network of people that he will contact who might like to buy it and own it privately. Or there was a church I think in South London where they were buying an organ. I think they're probably paying like 30 grand or something. Yeah. And for your money, you get the organ from County Durham and he brings it in and he builds it again in the room and sets it up so it can play for the community. And it's an amazing documentary. It's like incredible. Lots to say about it. But basically, when I was in Salisbury Cathedral, he's like, put your foot there. And it's the lowest pedal. Of course, I know what's going to happen. And I put it down and I can't hear it. I mean, I have problems with my hearing, so I don't hear bass as well. But he's like, oh, it's like a rumble. It's it's pure infrasound.
Is that a 64?
It's 32 foot. It's 32 feet is the longest, and it is. It's like a massive pipe. But anyway, I think it was Tom Armitage who mentioned this. I believe that's right, and apologies if I've got it wrong, but shout out to Tom anyway. But he was like, oh, have you not listened to Maxime Denunc's Nacked Horn? And I was like, no, I hadn't. And so Nacked Horn is Maxime Denuncus from Brussels taking his laptop with Max MSP on it,
Yeah.
plugging it into MIDI-enabled
Yeah.
church organs
Yeah.
because they have a MIDI layer, often sat unused, but it was there provided so that you could have player piano stuff.
Yeah.
You could just have files and it would be played by the organ. The organ would just play a file into the room. And then he makes this amazing rave-inspired music that's like purposefully aims to play the organ in a way that could not be played by human hands. So doing like runs that are just like the whole keyboard in like a fraction of a second, but in a key, inhumanly fast. And then doing like Reishi, like
doing percussion and things on it, presumably.
Well,
or little...
there is a track, Agoraphobia, appropriately named, where it's like, it is like a techno track. It's like like the bells, but he's at least getting so much of the organ to engage at a time that there is like a percussive whoomp.
Yeah.
And there's like a clicking, I think, of all of the...
Yeah.
There are, as I understand it, there's like...
Lots of valves, isn't there?
Yeah, it's like... I don't fully understand it. It mentions a little bit in that documentary about how things slide out the way, and there must be a kind of sound. And anyway, the long story short is that that inspired me to be like, why the fuck are we not all using amazing organ sample libraries?
So that's why you got a bit of a sample library.
And basically, I'm like, there's this whole cottage industry of dorky organ sample libraries that are based on real organs. I'm sorry.
By dorky, do you mean cool?
I do mean, in this context, unbelievably cool, because someone has gone to like extreme care to recreate the organ, for example, from Ripon Cathedral.
How do the acoustics work on it? Because I imagine
I think they have to use some kind of convolution
but they somehow record it
sampling
dry.
tricks. No, I think
I always think it's so.
No, I think they do have some of the acoustics
knitted together.
They also, I think, they record from multiple mic positions.
Right.
So, like, for example, and I forget the name of it, but I'll link it below. But there was one that I looked at, which is, and they're all designed really for people with building their own home organ consoles. Yeah. But of course, they all respond to MIDI. So my idea was to have like ranks of or manuals of key steps and just key step it. But obviously, if you're Maxime Denuncus, you use Max MSP and multiple channels, and he's doing like gestural things where he'll draw a little curve, and it'll fly up and down a scale. And there's a million algorithmic things you could do to play them. But like these sample sets, having tried them briefly, it sounds like they sound wicked.
I bet, yeah.
And they, I got the Royal Albert Hall one, which they kindly sent. James Everingham, I think is the guy who did it. And so they sampled the voice of Jupiter, it's so called, which is...
That's one of the patches, is it?
That's the name of the organ's nickname, the voice of Jupiter, the one in the...
Just imagine the stop you pull out.
It's just Jupiter. Just like, get ready, you're going to you're going to shit yourself. And that's a really good... It's a great sample set. It's like 120 quid or something, and it's contact library. You can instantiate. And it's got there's carillon bells in there as well. There's one drum that's built in, literally, and it sounds good. It's got like a kind of, it does have acoustics. It does feel like there's a decay. Yeah. It has a kind of dusty sound, and I'm like, is that just? That's not hiss. That's just the actual tone of air being pushed through the. But it does sound like I was just starting to do kind of selected ambient work, ambience. I was like, man, like this through a load of Valhalla just sounds absolutely amazing. And I'm like, why is this not a whole genre of music of like post-rave organs, either real thing with MIDI. How do you get permission? You need to, and that is something I will.
I bet it
approach.
can't be that difficult.
Now I've got my friend at Salisbury Cathedral. It's just like Ripon Cathedral. I looked up has got so the organs. To answer your question of how old they are, they're like it varies, but basically there are still organ makers. There's one in Durham. I think it's at Harrison. and they do retrofits. So there will quite often be like
maybe the pipes stay on and they do all the other equipment.
They MIDI retrofit as well.
Yeah.
And I know, because it says it on the website, Ripon has got MIDI retro. It's got MIDI on it. So there's a MIDI port in Ripon Cathedral that I could plug into.
That's it.
And just like play my rave key steps and do a Maxime Denuc. And it's that's to me
such a brilliant.
just,
it's such a bucket list. I mean,
Really.
if somebody's in the south of England and they can get me access to an organ,
I mean, there's
the
tons.
north of England, you can go.
There's tons, yeah. North of Leicester or whatever, then I'll take care of it.
But of course, have you spoke to Sam? Look, Mum, no computer about this because he bought an organ.
Of course he has, yeah.
And it was exactly as you said. There was a church organ, and then a woman from the church wanted it, had it installed in her, I think, like quite small terraced house, like built into the house. Then she left the house. I don't know whether she died or whatever, but she was no longer needed the house. The house has to be sold. They're like, we can't sell a house with a church organ built into it.
Why ever not?
So Sam somehow finds out about this and buys the thing.
Yeah.
And then he kind of unleashes the wrath of organ enthusiasts who are all they're all like, that's not how you do it. You're doing it wrong. You don't know what you're doing it wrong. He made a very funny video about exactly this.
You're doing it wrong.
You know, he's like, you're cutting through all those cables. You're never going to be able to put it back together. So you can imagine for him, it's like
it's a red rag.
Oh yeah, I can.
Yes, I definitely can.
And when I went there, which must have been like 2 years at least ago, he just had like one or two banks of pipes working, connected to a KeyStep Pro, so you could just hold down a chord and arpeggiate it, and that was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And like some really basic kind of compressor to blow air through it.
Yeah.
But I think now he's got loads of it set up.
I mean,
so you need one in your house.
I think I do. I mean, like there is in that organ
You've got
stock.
space. You've got a garden and stuff.
I've got a garden studio. But
I'll
I'll put it. Yeah, I'll put it outside the studio.
Maybe the big pipes come out through the roof.
Go out through the roof like chimneys.
Yeah, exactly. Give your neighbours something to think about.
Like I do think I'm getting a lot of mileage out of MIDI-enabled ones, which definitely is.
Yeah, that's what people said in the 90s too, wasn't
I know.
it?
Yeah, indeed. Look where that got us.
Yeah, exactly.
You've
got the program card in your Roland synth. Organs 2.
But I literally do. I have this dream that if I compose the music, then if I've got the MIDI of it, then I can go to a real.
You can totally do that.
It's just this sort of chicken and egg situation where you're like, if I'm going to compose music for something, I want to ask Maxime Denuc how he does this, because I'm like, how do you write? Because you can't just get let into the Dusseldorf Cathedral, do you?
I'm sure if you go back to your mate in, where was it?
Salisbury Cathedral.
And say, can I come in for an afternoon?
I mean,
or early morning or whatever. I mean, the thing's gonna. I remember there was a TV show years ago where people learned to do things from their bucket list.
Right.
Jo Brand learned how to play the organ.
Oh, amazing!
And she did it.
Yeah.
She lives around here, so it was nearby. So there's clearly a friendly organ dude somewhere in Southeast London.
There is a part of me.
But I don't. I'm like you. I don't want to learn how to play it.
Like with the best will in the world, how many like starry-eyed, young to middle-aged people come banging the door down, going, "Please let me cut. I'm desperately passionate about organs." I'm certain you would
find somebody.
What I mean is, like, I'm sure that enthusiasm is like.
I think maybe you've got to rework your approach, though. You've got at the moment you're too open. I was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about how you get engineers to do things. He was working in a big company and they had some real kind of crisis. And the CEO of the company was like, don't worry, we'll sort this out. And they walk across the office, they go to the coffee machine, and there's two of their best engineers standing by the coffee machine. The CEO is like, I'm sure this is impossible, but...
No.
2 days later, they had a working prototype of the whole thing going. So you shouldn't be like, oh, if only somebody would let me into a church. You need to be, I need to find an organ with a particular 64-foot bass on it, pipe on it. And if you've got the right thing, then come back to me. Then the organ enthusiast will be like, we've got to find him the the mega organ.
I think that they would be like, you're doing it wrong because you're using MIDI. You're supposed to play the dang thing. Like,
I think you can get past that.
I mean, yeah, I have a sort of slightly secular approach as well, which I don't know.
I think it's going to be fine.
It's all into the glory of God, isn't it?
So-
just making music. So surely they'll let me in.
I went to a gig this year in a church just down the road. There's a church in Camberwell, which is a proper, real, active church. In the basement, in the crypt, it has a jazz club. And it's not like they have jazz nights in the crypt. It's a jazz club. It's got like tables and chairs and a bar and stuff. But it's still a working church upstairs. And then the concert I saw was in the main working church upstairs. And it was amazing. Full of people it was like in August or summer at some point.
Like Union Chapel.
Beautiful, like Union Chapel, but is Union Chapel still an active church?
I think it
might well be, actually.
I think it might be.
Yeah.
Like it's both is the point. It sustains the. It's very difficult, and that's what that documentary. Because they're closing. These churches are closing because there's just no one goes to them. Their audience is dying.
Yeah.
And so the instruments in them and their community role falls apart.
So they can fix this with the enormous number of people wanting to play MIDI rave tunes through their organs. Yes. That's gonna
you have an internet-connected little Arduino-powered box, and then anyone can buy time.
A couple of microphones at the back.
A couple of mics built in. Do you remember that? There was
silo.
I was about to say to you, do you remember that silo thing that I read about first on the music thing blog?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you do remember. Yeah, it was a website, and I tried.
Yeah, and you would upload. Did you upload sounds and they came back?
Yeah, I did a Alvin Lucia. I uploaded the same sound multiple times.
Yeah.
Well, no, every generation I uploaded the new sound. It's incredible. So there was a pipe. What was it called? It was xylophone or
something like that. Yeah,
it was the
silo was definitely the word. Yeah,
and basically someone had set up a speaker, a mic, and a little web.
It's probably still going.
Yeah, somewhere there's a Pentium 266 just chugging along, still connected on dial-up.
Yeah.
And you could play your sound and it would return to you a minute later, having been played somewhere in America into a pipe, and you'd get it back. And I think the world needs more of these physical services.
That reminds me of not my newest obsession, but I think I'm slightly obsessed about at the moment, which is shortwave radio. Have you heard of this? Did I talk to you about this before?
Do you mean the sort of being able to access shortwave radio through the web? So where you there's the one where there's the globe and you can just spin.
No, that's just listening to web radio. What this is they have a device of some kind connected to an antenna.
Yeah.
And multiple people at once can log onto it and tune in exactly live, exactly like you're sitting there tuning a kind of shortwave radio.
Yeah.
But it's got a massive antenna and it's all properly set up.
Yeah, that's like the silo, but for shortwave.
And it's incredible.
Do you hear UVB 76?
You would do if it was still functioning. Exactly.
Are there any number stations still?
There was a story about, certainly at the beginning of the Ukraine war, Ukrainians were kind of trolling, I think it was UVB 76, playing digitized memes at it. Because you get those things where on the web radio thing, it has a kind of waterfall,
spectrograph.
Like a spectrograph, but of the whole electromagnetic spectrum. So you see a kind of line lit up, and you go over to it and you hear a signal. But then they have, I don't know what they're for, but you have these wide signals that take up, I don't know whether it's broadcasting images or something, but it's like a big chunk of the spectrum.
Sausage.
And you put your receiver under it and you get these mad kind of digital, it sounds like, was it photosynth? That's
or
metasynth. It sounds like that, principle. But it is being broadcast out into the world. It is absolutely.
What's the website called? Do you remember that?
It's Web SDR is the kind of concept.
Web SDR.
SDR is software defined radio, and it's like how you get digital radios now. Not digital radios like DAB radios, where it's just broadcasting a digital signal. This is where instead of having loads of capacitors and stuff connected to the aerial, it just, I guess, digitizes what's coming down the aerial and then uses DSP to tune in. It's absolutely mad because it's the idea that shortwave radio is such an interesting idea, but I'm not going to buy thousands of pounds worth of stuff and put antennas on the roof and stuff.
Also, it's
But
like
with
it's
this,
very
you can do it.
location and weather and
This is it. You can listen to shortwave radio in Brazil.
That's interesting.
It's
Yeah, I
really
wanna
interesting.
play
It
that.
sounds amazing, and it's really kind of because I'm thinking about doing another retreat that would be
Are you?
radio themed.
Okay.
So we're doing another version of the one I did last year, which, well, as we're talking, there's a couple of places left, so I don't know if they will still be free when we go through it. But that's the same we did last year, which is about graphic scores in this same house in Cornwall, and it will be kind of recreating the same thing, and that's the thing that the workshop system was originally built for. But then I'm also looking at doing one that is something to do with radio as a kind of sound source, inspiration source.
Interesting.
Just because I think it's such an interesting area.
And why? Because radio is sort of, from my perspective on it, like shortwave is the closest thing we have to sort of. It feels adjacent to like spirit recordings.
And spirit recording is exactly part of it as well.
Love that
There's
stuff,
a
like
really
the
good book.
spooky kind of-
Have you read that book by Peter? What's his name? Peter. Can't find it. It's on my list.
Right.
Peter Bebergal. His book is called Strange Frequencies, and
Nice.
it's exactly that. It's about things like spirit radios. It's kind of technology and seances and all those things connected. And the idea of spirit radio, where you just listen to essentially noise, Rhodesian radio, but you hear
Pareidolia means you
exactly
hear,
that.
You hear
Exactly.
You hear Konstantin Raudiv. There is a breakthrough. Is the thing like I read about this when I was a teenager. I discovered it on a kind of corner of the internet. This thing called what they called ITC, Instrumental Transcommunication.
What's that?
And it was supposedly a group of researchers who had success in using computers and radios to contact the dead, to speak to the other side. And they had these recordings, little snippets, like I'm in my mind I can see it, sort of GeoCities era internet. You know, for you kids, dial up. It was like dialed up to
Press a
learn.
button and it takes a couple of like half a minute to load, and then you get a little
like
10-second
like little
MP3.
tiny little thing which they were sure was like, I am here.
Yeah.
But it's the pareidolia being the effect of seeing a face in Mars, a face in the clouds.
Yeah.
Humans are tuned, our ears are tuned to hear these frequencies and to listen for things. We'll kind of hear whatever we want to hear. My interest in it is like, I don't know. I'm any sensible person is to some degree agnostic. I don't really think that these people necessarily contacted the other side.
No.
But it's
interesting.
Fascinating. I love ghost stories, and I love haunted stories. For every year, for the last 2 years, I've read and put on my Patreon an M.R. James ghost story. So subscribe on Patreon if you would like to hear. There's two ghost stories that I read, and I love them. I just think I think there's something just quintessentially terrifying about the idea that the sound of the ghost is with you in the room.
Yeah.
And only through technology or through a radio, through a speaker, do
Yeah.
you get a clue that they're there.
Yeah.
And there's an innate and fascinating horror to that.
Yeah.
But I suppose with your interest in radios, then I think what will be the angle? What is going to be the?
I think that in some ways, I was trying to think about it. It's a bit like the purpose of a graphic score is you look at something outside you, and it somehow kind of inspires you and gives you permission. It's like what we were talking about earlier, but it gives you permission to do something different and distinctive. You're like, I'm going to struggle to look at this graphic score and make a thing that sounds a bit like Daft Punk. I mean, which is what I might do naturally, instinctively.
To struggle.
Just struggle to look at this graphics score and make,
Homework.
something that sounds like something else. But I can respond to it, and then I can say, and if I make something unusual, you're like, well, why does it sound like that? And I'm like, I was playing this weird drawing.
Yeah.
You know, what you wanted to sound like.
Yeah.
I sort of feel a bit like radio, because of its kind of randomness and its like unknowableness. Like when you get into shortwave stuff, you do just hear these
You hear
weird
amazing tones,
pulsing
don't you?
sounds and tones and that sort of stuff, and that just go. Like you see something on when you're looking at it, and you see this sound, and then it just stops, and you see the kind of woodfall disappearing. You're like,
Yeah, it's
where's it
just
gone?
stopped transmitting.
Where is it?
It is like cosmic horror.
And so you've got that, and you're then saying, okay, well, that, if I'm then going to respond to that musically in some way, which might be I've recorded it and I'm looping it, or it might be the rhythm of it is interesting, or it might be because also then you've also got, again, in the shortwave, you've got things like Chinese propaganda stations that play classical music all day long. You've got...
Would you be able to pick those up from Cornwall? Depending
You'd be able to pick them up from
favourable,
SDR.
of course,
That's
favourable weather conditions.
That's the point.
Is
I'm like, probably would just
part of me
do
is
this on
like,
SDR.
can you not get? Is there not some off-the-shelf kind of big ass antenna?
Well, look at that behind you there.
Have you got a
that is, if you just see it behind you there.
ATS-20?
Yeah, so that is a 30 quid, like...
Let's see if we can get a copyright strike.
You definitely won't be able to.
That has been signed off by
So
all
that's just
sides,
FM.
in Israel, ending
The problem is, it really is very difficult with this to get anything beyond this.
Is it worse or better if you touch the area? Always feels like it makes more noise when you touch the aerial. I'm like, is that better or is that worse?
Maybe it's better. I don't know. I haven't found anything terribly interesting with this.
You're reminding me of a module that I made a demo video of about 100,000 years
The
ago.
shortwave module.
The shortwave,
Yeah.
the RF Nomad.
Yeah.
Which is, and like that is a real your mileage may vary module where I remember to get signal, I needed to I created a long ass wire and I strung it. I was in North London, 8 or 9 miles from here north, and I ran it around the top of my room.
Yeah.
And
did you get anything?
Yeah, I got like some stuff. I got some voices like Spanish and other things. But like the best shortwave that I ever received was with a Sony. I have a Sony like shortwave radio, like a digitally controlled shortwave medium, like little compact one designed for listening to like 5 Live. But it has got all the shortwave, you can tune into a broad spectrum of sound, and that little unit. And also I have got an ICOM, like a handheld ICOM one that's like a little unit. And my most triumphant things on that shortwave, I heard UVB 76.
Amazing.
Or, no, I heard our number station.
Yeah.
And I have a recording actually on my YouTube channel. There's an ancient video
of that,
of like that radio tuning in, and you can hear that bit where it just goes like, after it stops transmitting. I was like, and but my best other one was with the ICOM. There was a experiment that was happening with the International Space Station.
Oh yes,
where it was using its ham radio to rebroadcast signals, and I had like looked up on the internet that at 6:30 in the morning, the ISS would come overhead, and I should be able to hear things if I tuned into that frequency. And so I literally went outside with the thing in my pocket, my mini disc recorder, tells you the era, and then stood with like the aerial in, literally 6:30 in the morning, stood in a garden in Yorkshire, and sure enough, within a minute, I started to hear the sounds fade in, and there's like all of this kind of like polyglot of broadcasts from Europe that were being beamed up to the ISS and then rebroadcast back down. It was like, amazing.
I can show you this.
So you're on
This is on the
websdr.ewi. Oh god, it's a huge URL. We'll link to it. If I denoise this is going to ruin this bit, so I'll have to.
I'm just having trouble.
So can I lift up your laptop to show the audience?
So that's the. This is definitely not working at the moment.
Basically, you're seeing like what looks like a sort of spectrum of sound with, I don't know what the scale is here, but you've got all these bands, and presumably the bands are like sounds.
Yeah, if you when it works, you kind of tune into it and you kind of zoom in. There we go.
don't understand is, hang on, so
This is broadcasting live.
are you manually controlling the tuning of a device somewhere, or are you somehow...
Yeah, it's a digital. This is what I mean.
But
you're
like, are
tuning it.
you changing a physical thing somewhere in the world? Or are you
You're
tuning...
changing a digital thing on that device, I think. I don't really know. But,
So there's a limited amount of users that
I
can
think
tune
so,
into
yeah.
this at any...
but I mean,
Oh, there you go.
it's a lot of good noises here.
Oh, that's a nice one.
No, it's sort of thing.
If that's not
You don't
got
even-
Christmas
that's already-
number one
that's
written
already
all
music,
over it.
isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think to get sound that good,
I like it when you
Okay,
get
so
those
there-
weird, like, ring modulated
but
voices.
that's when you need a different mode.
Yeah,
You need-
side bands or whatever.
I think that says what I think that's Voice of Korea. And this is coming from Holland.
That sounds like Aphex to me.
I really hope you get a copyright strike off that.
Yeah, if I do. That... Look at this. You can see there's like this rhythm that's
Yeah.
like descending, and it's traversing
Yeah.
the bands as well.
Yeah. So I reckon
That is actually really
a week in Cornwall doing that would be pretty good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I only think that you owe it to like Scanner, Robin,
Yes,
and everyone
exactly.
to do the sort of functional musical equivalent of having the microphone hanging out of the window while you record
do,
your piece.
yeah.
You should have some sort of localized...
You need some the other thing...
have some gear, like, you know, that you can tune
This
into
just
what is
arrived.
around you.
This is a completely illegal device that just arrived in post today.
Medium wave radio transmitter. Are you starting a very, very small pirate radio
That
station?
is a very small medium wave pirate radio station.
Yes.
That's the idea for this retreat. You do like make something and then broadcast it, and then I have no idea if that will work.
Special request, my mate Thomas.
Exactly.
Wow. So I mean, you can't get into trouble with this
No,
unless,
you could.
unless
Totally
you
could.
strap like
I looked it up. You definitely
121 gigawatts into
can. No,
that.
you could definitely get in trouble.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
The only thing
is this-
that's legal is those little car FM radio
They were like
transmitters.
2 foot ones.
That's the only thing that's legal.
How far is this bad
I have
boy?
no idea.
About 10 feet. I don't think that, you know,
I'll turn it off very quickly.
like the BBC should be particularly worried about you.
Well, we will see. I suspect you will get a call just because I showed that on. They'll get into you. It'll be like Vactrons all over again.
Yeah, the delicious lead.
Cadmium.
Okay, cadmium. You definitely need to get some like shortwave.
No, you
get,
definitely
like,
just- no.
stupid Sony, like old
Exactly.
Sonys. Just get a handful.
Exactly, you can do that.
Seriously,
I think it's you definitely need some of that, and then
and if anyone is listening to this, the advice that is the most valuable is what is the aerial. I know there's stuff
Yeah.
about you can tune aerials, like
Yeah.
what, like, but that tuning
and I think
your aerials. So that
the other thing with all of these things, it's like the point though is that has to be the jumping off point.
yeah,
To me, I
that's not
listen
the
to
end.
that and then go. You almost like
For you, it's a provocation.
yeah.
It's like
you
a-
could say.
what
And
do
I,
you think?
and I like that it doesn't need to be electronic. It doesn't need, you hear a little kind of melody out of a number station and then write a piece of music based on it.
That's how I make music. Is I always like find one little inspirational jumping off
Yeah.
point, some stupid sound or some little thing, usually from the functional equivalent of letting my hands
Yeah.
fall on the keyboard. It'll just be I've got a new music easel, so I'm just going to mess around and just
Yeah.
something catches your ear. So I agree. You're giving people, by doing that, you're saying this is how to get into composing a track.
And you're really giving
Start
them
with one thing.
4 days in a nice house somewhere with nothing else to do and interesting people around them. And then if you've got some kind of nudge, some kind of provocation, it's
right.
fun. Because it was amazing, the one in
The only thing
this
is you need to popularize these. Is you need to you're doing the private retreat version, but it would be nice for you to do that. Feels like a YouTube video.
I think that's true. I think
provocation.
because the retreat started when I wrote that years ago, I wrote an album in an evening with a
Yeah, sine wave.
no, before then.
Right.
Years ago, I did a Medium post that was, I wrote an album in an evening with a Lunchbox modular synth and a Python script.
Yes.
That was just saying, create a text score and then just record it in 4 minutes, one for each one, and then put it out. That was the kind of prompt that then Dion, who runs the retreats, read that and was and I think that, so yeah, you're quite right. Having that methodology, that way of working available to people is definitely...
Just you're giving people a framework to think about, A, how to use modulars, and B, how to write music.
Yeah.
You're reminding me, like, I was going to ask you what the best, other than the Music Thing Workshop synth, what is the best piece of music technology? And I was going, that came out in 2024, in your opinion. I was going to start mentioning, selfishly, the one that I was thinking of was, I think, like Tim Exile's Scape Shift, which feels similar to a lot of the things that we've been discussing, in the sense that he built... Have you tried it? Like,
no, I haven't.
So to summarize, it's a reactor patch that can generatively produce entire pieces of music.
Right.
It's the functional equivalent of you're making a sound garden. It's a thing that will, with very little input, it's just filled with little dice icons.
Right.
And if you pull on the dice and let go, it's like going twang.
Yeah.
And when you twang, it resets and rolls the dice, and it changes a load of parameters that are in the piece, in the software.
Yeah.
It's not AI, it's just generative. So it's just generatively, like, it's composing melodies and drum patterns, and it has drum synths and some synth engines.
So what do you do
engines.
when you're using it?
So
Apart from just pressing random.
I would just I would roll the dice once, hit record, and then just put it on Bandcamp. I mean, and it's interesting, and there's a reason I wanted to bring this up.
Selling this to that nice Scandinavian man who runs Spotify, he might be...
Yeah, he'd be totally into this, because there is a question I wanted to pose to you about this, because it raises questions of authorship, which I think are an interesting one when we talk about generative things, because you, as a man who is famous for making a very generative sequencer.
And it's interesting, people didn't read the terms and conditions when they bought a Turing machine. Because
actually, you need to be paid
this has been a big challenge with James Blake, because I do own all of his albums.
Of course you now do, yeah.
Yeah, which he's not happy about. That's why I've been able to give up my day job.
That thing about, what's her chops? Laurie Spiegel's Music Mouse, a piece of Atari software that I've been started to play with. Music Mouse is amazing. There's an online version you can play. You drag a mouse, and it creates these amazing arpeggios and chords. It's a wicked thing. But she says on the terms and conditions in the little drop down on the Atari and on the Mac, if you use this in a composition, you have to put somewhere in the liner notes, partially composed using Music Mouse, credit to Laurie Spiegel.
But that's all you have to do. You don't have to pay anything.
You don't have to pay Laurie Spiegel.
So it's like a Creative Commons license almost.
Like the one that the Behringer don't use. But
sure, but it's
sorry, I just had to get.
But it's nice as a kind of I didn't realise that she was thinking about it in that way.
I think
that it's very like Creative Commons as an idea of saying, I'm not asking you any money, but don't make out like you created this yourself.
But then you did create it yourself, is the thing. So it's just, I suppose it just raises this question: to what extent can a maker of the tools, or what extent does a maker of the tools deserve credit? The Scape Shift
I think
thing,
it's up to the maker of the tools, isn't it? Because most tools, if you were to retain ownership of its output, nobody's going to want it. If you're Mr. Fairlight, think of something that it was really obvious and you could hear it on things all through the 80s. You could hear that sound. If you were Mr. Fairlight and you said, right, you've got to pay me 0.01% royalties for everything used on, it probably just wouldn't have
taken off.
If I make a really good plane or hammer or something, am I going to try and get money off the carpenter who's used it for something? But then,
well, what if you've made an algorithm that's trained on people's music and
that's very problematic.
We're getting the areas are grey and gooey and murky now. But
but I would say that's different from a tool maker.
It is.
I think I'm a tool maker. I'm not generating work from other people's things.
I think ultimately you're right to say that it's a question of what the
Or
artist...
it's
the
other
author-
people who've designed electronic circuits. I'm using some of their work, but I'm not using the musical output that somebody's done.
It's hard. Basically, my feeling about it, because someone raised this, basically I wrote an EP using Scapeshift. And to answer what I actually did when I did that, I would roll the dice to get until it was making a state that pleased me.
Yeah.
And no one else. There's no one else in the room. Tim Exile's not in the room.
Yeah.
Me. And so I'm listening for something that emotionally evokes something. And it raises a question of...
But I suppose my specific question was: are there controls to change the sounds and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
so
you can.
It's like a studio that you can go and tweak things.
You can go granular, and you can adjust every little bit of the control. Or there are some macro controls, so you can just have a broad strokes. And I would mostly use broad strokes.
A betterizer.
Yeah, there's like...
You remember to turn it up.
Turn up good and not shit. Yeah, exactly. And so...
I'm encouraging people to turn it down as far as they can.
Yeah, until
it's
as shit
more
as possible.
freeing, yeah,
it's good for you. And so I would experiment with the shitness that I was happy to accept. And then I would basically record jams using that. And then there was an editing process where I did some quite severe edits where I would go from this to this. And actually, there was some bits where I was like, I just need this to happen now. And I just recorded a bit of Korg Modwave. Right. And added a few little ornaments, literally.
Yeah.
Could have used a workshop. Silly me. But, and then I'm sort of claiming ownership. But I did say in the line notes, I struggle with this. And I said, music conducted by Milo Melodies using Scapeshift by Tim Exile, because what people commented, there were some people who commented on the video that I made about Scapeshift. They were like, well, this is not okay. As in, I'm paraphrasing, being slightly a bit more aggro, but there were some people who were quite you just can't, they were said, you just can't say you wrote this music if you use this tool.
Yeah.
And my feeling, and they're saying that because Tim Exile designed the system. And so what they're saying is Autechre, who do music in a very similar way, where they have built a complex system and they steer it and they take full credit for the music. Yeah. What this person is saying, that if I was to somehow, bust into Rob and what's his name, Sean's laptops,
press play
and adjusted some settings,
would it be an Autechre record?
It would be Autechre's music and not mine.
That's a very interesting
it raises this
way of looking at it. Yeah.
I would say, and I do agree, I agree with this to a degree, because I could definitely, hand on heart, say, if I've built my own modular synth, even if it uses a Turing machine, which it most likely does, I take credit for the music that is composed with it, because I designed the system and I steered it. But we get into this murky area because you don't design your fucking Wurlitzer. You didn't design this.
Exactly.
How dare you take credit for the music? And what we're saying
But that's the difference between an instrument and something that's not an instrument. And that's where for me, with that thing, I definitely don't... I haven't thought of 90% of the things that people can do with it. Like in just the most basic kind of patching, let alone the actual kind of melodic or sound or rhythmic or whatever they're doing with it. And it's designed to be completely open. And it is, I suppose it's a bit, but it's also the kind of randomization. It's like when you have one of those DX7 software things, like Dext, whatever. If you have a DX7 software that has a random button and it's properly doing it, 99.9% of them are just white noise.
Yeah.
Because if you do the random settings on it, it will just produce white noise. So that means the tool is very, very constrained by the way people have used it. So if you're using preset on a DX7, they've shut off millions of other kind of options for that one. But the tool is all there. It's all kind of open for you. But it sounds like, would it be possible with the Tim Exile thing to make something that is completely terrible or just pointless or white noise or just incomprehensible?
Yeah.
If you roll the dice often, it just produces absolute nonsense.
He has Tim Exile himself has defined boundaries.
Because that's
for
what
the
it's like.
dice rolling.
I think there's a question about how wide the boundaries are. It's
Yeah.
like if you think of like physical tools, if I've got some kind of like electric device that you put on a piece of wood and it roots out a keyhole or something, and it just does that, and it's all basically controlled. That's a different type of device from a chisel and a hammer. And lots of people would suggest that there is a different level of artistry involved, and there's a different level of kind of creation. I'm always thinking, well, actually, show me somebody who can do something interesting with the machine that roots out the keyholes or something, or does something clever with it. But if they are like, look, I've made a thing that's got a bunch of keyholes in it, it's a bit like, that's great.
Well,
But it's that range of, I suppose it's the range is what's interesting. Is like if it's how far, how much is it representing you and how much is representing what was in the device itself.
I do think I'm reminded now from what you said that what my overarching thought when faced with someone's criticism about the validity of using a tool like Scapeshift was that at the end of the day...
It's to close the used to comment. You can choose
sorry?
comments and get on with your life.
Is that what you think about how valid the music I made is of absolutely zero consequence.
Yeah.
And all that matters is the music good.
Yeah.
As I spend a lot of time of my life thinking about whether some piece of technology will help me make music make music more easily, I'm reminded that actually all that matters is whether it's good. And the only definition of whether it's good is do I experience any emotion when I listen to it
With the music, the output.
because that's it. It's just nothing else matters. It doesn't actually matter how no one gives a fuck how hard it was for you to make or not. No one gives a fuck.
I've just
It's
realised
not the thing that makes music good or not. It's just whether it makes you experience an emotion.
I've just realised was this year 7 or year 8?
It is year 7.
The fundamental difference between you and me, you are like, will this device help me make music more easily? And I'm like, will this music device help it make it more difficult to make music?
I'm not sure is that going to be your goal? Is that going to be
It's
the
not
hallmark
really.
of what is that going to be your MO?
It's not. I
of
suppose
your
it's
new
easier.
full-time
Maybe
gig?
yours makes it easier to make good music, and mine makes it easier to make difficult
But
music.
what I would, and also I thought again that the exercise of writing music using Scapeshift was quite. What I found interesting was it made things. I have the best compliment. Someone said, "Oh, it sounds like your music."
Yeah,
The
that's
things
really interesting.
Which is good,
Yeah.
and that is a sign that I was responding to the things that I respond to. But then it's just didn't sound. I actually did think it sounded more abstract and free, and I was like, "Fuck it!" I'm not concerned about 4-bar intervals and 8-bar intervals. I didn't have the normal level of control that I would have. I had to give up control to the machine, and I found that quite interesting because I was going in more abstract. I was happy to explore a more Orteca-y realm, but I want something that's a bit more soulful. I find some of Orteca's stuff a bit like bug music, and it's I want to feel. So to that point its role was to basically do a very Whitwellian thing that it forced me to reconsider what I was, what was good, basically, and that an abstract thing was good and was what I wanted to hear, and I was like, this is good for me to do this.
I think what you said there about it sounded like you is also though really interesting. From my point of view, what I find it really interesting when I'm seeing people making stuff with the workshop system, when somebody makes something that to me doesn't sound like the workshop system, I'm immediately like, what is that? That's really interesting. Because there's clearly a kind of there's a thing you can do which involves a bunch of cross-modulated, cross-FM stuff and kind of chaos that is quite workshop system-y. But when I see somebody making something very rhythmic or very, like stuff Siren was doing was just very kind of ambient, tiny little sounds going out into a looper, but then like really piercing high sine waves coming out and just cutting through all this kind of fog, because it was literally a very foggy room, lots of smoke in the room and lots of very thick reverb on it. So these kind of piercing tiny sounds coming out of it was just, not something that I would ever have done, or not something I would imagine it working.
Did you say how he patched it, or was he patching it lots of different ways?
He was patching it. He was changing the program cards during the gig,
Oh, yeah.
which was quite alarming, but worked perfectly. But I think that was things like just making. My impression was that was just literally little sine waves going into a looper, and just work. Yeah, it was just a really interesting sound to have in that space.
Interesting. What's on your list of what? I suppose the question would be then: what of the things that happened in 2024 that we have not discussed? What sticks in your craw?
Isn't sticks in my core like
that? Actually sounds just like I was a bit annoyed about it.
No, I wasn't.
I know.
One of the things I've been meaning
joyfully
to do
crawled
for years, and finally did, was made a really, really expensive DI box.
Oh, finally! Thank God.
But have you not? Well, you probably haven't. But you haven't.
I've got that. I got that Franklin SS6 thing.
That was on my list of things.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really nice, interesting idea.
Yeah.
Such a nice idea. It seems like a really nice company.
Yeah.
Just so cool. I haven't actually bought one, but I thought. And do you use it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I recorded my mod wave for my Tim
And you
Exile
just constantly have it on the big switch.
Because I have lots of islands, and basically I've got a UA Apollo with a spare pair of XLR ins, which I don't use. So it goes into those, and there's a few choice synths I can have on my table around me that are like, here are the things I can wang into Ableton Live.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can just go that now, and you just label all of the switches. Yeah. And it's a nice way of doing that without using a mixer. I've got a bunch of mixers, but they're all in use, so it is good. So what's your DI then?
So this was literally, I was like, the DI is basically Transformers. There's nothing else to it than Transformers. And the Transformers in this are British made. So they're...
Who's the brand? Is it Lundal or...
No,
what's the...
Not the British one.
They're not British. I would have a go.
Lundal is Swedish.
Oh, so sorry.
Yes. I now had momentarily can't remember which the brand is. But it's the idea
works
that...
for ABBA, then surely it's good enough for you.
There are so few things in the world that are actually made in England, and they're just absurdly expensive.
Why?
Because they're handmade in England.
Franklin wind their own transformers apparently, and I know that when Rode, who made these microphones, Sauter, I've heard of Sauters. What are the ones that Neve use?
They're a cheaper version of those, I think.
Well, of course, Neve, that cut rate.
Exactly.
Cut rate shysters.
And so you're like, I think these are like £75 each, plus like VAT and shipping. So you're like,
what?
That's what they are.
That's a lot of money for a part. That we can generally agree that. And is that because you're just Joe Public buying them? You're not like if, for example, I was Neve and I wanted to buy 100, it would be.
Obviously, it'd be cheaper. But when you see pieces of studio gear that cost like $3,000 or $5,000 or whatever.
Yeah, it might be because there's a £75 part in them.
Yeah, they'll have 6 of those on it.
Well, that's my friend Dave Rossum told me this year that the way to price something, you can confirm if Dave Rossum knows anything about successfully releasing and selling music technology.
Has he had a lot of successful businesses?
Apparently so. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he's still going. Yeah. He is 5 times. Yes. It's 5 times the cost.
5 times would be a very sensible.
Yeah. If he said the immortal words, if you want to stay in business.
Yeah.
Charge 5 times.
But yeah, so that would mean if you put one of these into a device, you'd be charging...
What's your retail price for that?
See, I think that's why it was really nice to do. I obviously would never attempt to make somebody else buy this. I mean, it's got like the most expensive 1/4-inch socket on it.
Has it? What's good about that?
It's locking.
That looks like irritating. DBC grade.
It's exactly like that. Yeah, it's really irritating, actually. But
it's also not straight.
Very, very no, it's not straight at all. Very fancy, like everything. But
what did you learn?
I enjoyed the process of getting the stuff and putting it together, and it seems to sound nice. I'm not sure it sounds that different from a wire, but it sounds good.
I'm reflecting on this because in this year I've been like
Definitely wouldn't hum. If I went anywhere, there would be hum.
fucking
This
no
would
chance
stop
of
it.
that, mate.
And you've got a little switch.
Have you got a ground lift?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's hummier or less hummy. Also, you'll feel the weight once I put the
high
screw
quality. Like
I mean,
I've got.
you can see that I did actually get the screw holes entirely wrong, which is why it's all a bit skew-whiff. But
What's this for?
that's a stereo in from there.
Is that 3.5?
Yeah.
Is that 3.5?
Yeah, that's the
socket.
fanciest 3.5 mil stereo.
really is.
There's a stereo jack. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I expect like to hear a distant explosion when
You
I
would
plug
do.
that in. It's really nice. And
It's
so
a thing of joy.
you built this why? Because you needed one and you just
I
wanted
built
to
this-
build the best one you could possibly
I
get. for
sort
the money.
of needed one, but also it's like I've always been intrigued by the idea that there are people in England winding transformers for people like Neve and
Yeah.
those people, and that it's actually the simplest possible DIY thing to do. You see inside, it's literally just connecting. The actual plugging them in. You can make a useful thing with nothing. But I was always like, shall I make one? Oh, I won't buy the £75 one. I'll buy like a £30 one. And then you're like, well, I might as well just buy a decent DI box. What's the difference?
Well, yeah.
But I then thought, yeah, I'll just buy the fancy.
How did you arrive at the Sauter transformer as the...
Because they seemed to be they were British and they're the right. There's a certain type of transformer you need for a DI box, which is those, and they seemed the fanciest.
I forgot what I was going to say. There was something I was going to...
It was almost like a palette cleanser after spending a year doing
I see.
tiny components, thinking constantly about price as well. Like when I'm designing this, it's like, how do I structure this so the value is exactly where it should be? The money is where it is. You're spending the money on the interface, not on other things. So then
You talked about the knobs and using
Yeah.
like those good knobs because they feel better. We
Yeah.
talked about the teenage engineering ones that don't.
they're different, yeah. Oh yes, on that, yeah.
On their
modular thing.
affordable thing because
Yeah,
it was
exactly,
obviously
yeah.
made, the whole thing was made to an insane price.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
So I
obviously
think
it's not as
after
good.
a while of that, I was like, buy some expensive transformers and put them in a box.
You haven't got any little sticky feet on the bottom.
Do you think I
Slides
should
around
do?
like a... Yeah, you absolutely should.
Yeah, maybe I should.
You need like the highest end feet. You need like those ones that you can adjust and like, you know.
Because I mean, maybe there'd be vibrations into the transformers.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
might
you
affect
should
the
have
sound.
sort of like...
And then I need
little-
some special cables.
And you need a thing
cables.
that... I'm not making this up.
That lift the
holds
cables
the
off.
cables off the ground because don't let the cables touch the
No,
ground.
you don't want to touch the ground.
Honestly, some of this, like, I mean, I mentioned this before, but the audiophile stuff blows my mind.
It is
when I'm like,
amazing.
when there are rules around how you declare, you know, things on YouTube videos, you know, YouTubers are held to account rightly that you have to say, you know, you can't hide things. You've got to say what, you know, relationships and things like this. And yet, like why the Advertising Standards Agency hasn't basically annihilated
I
the
think it's
entire
because
audiophile industry is just
nobody's
insane to me.
Nobody is being harmed by it.
I
mean, they're not. If somebody
you're
wants,
describing it like religion, it's like
no, but
it's
if somebody wants to spend £35,000 on the power cable on the back of their amplifier, which is not a ridiculous, that's the sort of thing they would do.
yeah, they do.
Nobody's being harmed. Nobody's going hungry. Somebody has arranged. Somebody has made a business from selling £35,000 power cables. Good for them. It's not like
We could
selling.
agree
It's
to
like.
disagree
Did you
on
see
that.
the story about like protein shakes and like those supplements? Something like 30% of them have got lead or cadmium in them.
What?
You're like, that's not good. Don't do that.
No, it's not good. It's like the opposite.
If you've got trading standards or advertising standards, let's worry about them. And if somebody wants to sell, if somebody can find somebody to buy that,
you
fine.
sort of it's that
it's like
theory
that.
if
That amplifier I made, where the kit for the amplifier cost more than the new amplifier from Fender. If you bought a new modern one from Fender, they cost about £700, and the kit for that cost about £700. And I had to make it myself, and it took about.
so is it to a like massively higher standard than Because as you
It's
say,
just-
like here with this, if you bought a kit for this thing, it would be. What's the like, we could ask the question: what's the saving?
If I was just to if you actually wanted to sell a DI box with those Sauter transformers in them, you'd have to sell it for like 500 quid at least.
Yeah,
And
5
probably a lot
times.
more.
Yeah.
No, a lot more.
And how much would a
20 grand or
workshop?
something.
We talked a little bit about this. Like, how much might a workshop cost if it was pre-built? It's like how much.
So that's what I don't
human time worth?
And that's
Human time.
That's what if you were to buy a system and make it, I suppose if you were to make one, then it usually takes people about between 2 and 4 hours to make them. So if they're a reasonably skilled electronics assembly, but I don't know what a reasonably skilled
Minimum wage
electronics
times 2, right?
It probably is minimum wage times 2 or 3. So that's what going to be. I can't even work it out. It's
And
like,
then you need to times that by 5. Or do you? I'm joking.
yes,
I
no,
don't
you
know how
would.
it works.
That's true. If I was a company, which I am now.
Yeah. You're right.
Actually, I'm not quite yet. I do need to become one, but yes,
Okay.
sort of. Then your cost would include that person on minimum wage times 2 times 4 hours, and then you would need to multiply that by 5 and with the kit. So you'd be trying to sell them for like, I don't know what that is.
1,000 quid.
The actual answer though, we have somebody bought one and sold it on Reverb for like 650, 750, something like that. We were like, that looks fine if they want to do that.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the things with it is we've kind of, it's probably priced slightly low at the moment. It's definitely not cost times 5.
At 399 or whatever.
Yeah. So, and it might go up a bit for the kit just because I think it probably needs to be slightly more expensive. But then that question of how do you do, because that's what I really don't know is I don't think you could do an assembled version exactly like this. Apart from it was just the nuts, literally 54.
Is there not a nut
sockets.
winding machine or something you can make?
Well, when you see manufactured products, they don't generally have nuts like that on them, do they? You remember when the music keys all came out, but everyone was like, "Well, it hasn't got any nuts on the switches." You're like, it's not because they didn't think of it.
It's just a lot easier not to put them on.
Well, it's just
Just takes
fiddly. I mean, when you see like Dreadbox,
2 didn't have the
yeah,
mini Brute
Dreadbox thing.
did not.
I saw they've got one. They have those on all the Behringer stuff. Has those kind of plastic sockets that poke through, and I'm sure work absolutely fine. It's just a slightly different thing. And there is something very nice, I think, about whenever people pick this up, they're like, oh, it feels quite nice.
Yeah,
Because it is
well bonded to the
physically
panel.
like quite a sturdy thing on the front. So I think, but then there is an interesting thing there about doing an IKEA DIY one. Where
What do you
you
mean?
do all of the soldering is done,
Yeah.
but you need
Final assembly.
you need to stick on the front
The
panel.
Dreadbox. Dreadbox did the
that
same
sort of model, or the Korg, like MS-20 stuff.
Yeah.
that was that. I think
Why
that's
did they do that? Did they do that to make it a bit cheaper, or because is there? And this is what I was going to mention, like with the Atari thing. I'm like, what I half enjoy is that layer of initial tinkering,
Yeah.
where I bring it to life.
I
where
think that's
I like
incredibly
that
important.
birthing. It's a birthing experience.
I think that sense of ownership. It's called. It's been studied. It's been called the IKEA effect. Your relationship with a piece of IKEA furniture is different from a relationship with somebody
you
else's.
birthed it.
Because you've had some input into it.
Yeah.
And I do think that's really important. And I think we see it in like customer service, like people I have this funny thing, like there are weird quirks in this. Like there's a stereo input, and the way I designed the stereo input, I didn't even test this or think of it. If you plug in to the output of the stereo input with nothing plugged into the other end of it, you basically get the sound of the two oscillators kind of weirdly
bleeding through.
bleeding through, but
Okay.
pretty strongly bleeding through, because it's like quite a bit of gain and it's just a bit of wire with basically nothing on the end of it because it's not plugged into the socket, and the sockets aren't switched because it's stereo. People are like, mine does this. Have I done something wrong? And I was like, no, I mean, I've done something wrong, but I don't think it's particularly wrong. It doesn't have any downside. And people can start using it in patches, and people will be like, how do you do that thing with your oscillators? And I'm like,
You've got like more oscillators.
well, you've got like, yeah, it is exactly like Bleep. It's quite strong Bleep. So it's like high frequency, buzzy version of the oscillators. It's probably, I don't know if it's in phase or out of phase with them as well. So you might be able to do something weird. You might be able to patch it into rig mod against the, I don't know. It's things like that where I think in DIY world, people are like, have I done something wrong? This is weird. I would imagine if they'd bought it from Sweetwater, they might be like, this is incorrect. This is, I mean, not that example. It's such an obviously innocuous example. But I think generally people's, it's really nice dealing with DIY customers because they are interested and enthusiastic and understanding.
That kind of customer who's built it would have a different reaction to a problem. They would be like, oh, well, let's A, work with it, B, maybe I can help you solve it. I've had some people where somebody will, there'll be something wrong with their board. And they're like, shall I desolder? And I was like, please, really, we'll just send you another board. It's really fine. Please don't try and that's the thing. Is like, you're right. That there is more of a sense of
ownership,
willingness to work and flex, and it's not so much a transactional thing that you buy a thing and you expect a service. It's like we're collaborating, you and me.
It's amazing that it even applies to IKEA, which people have talked about the IKEA effect, and it does have some effect on that. I think it's also,
you get the whole like IKEA hacks, and you get people like,
well, that's the next step on. But I think it's also, I haven't seen this study, but it must have an effect on the secondhand market as well.
Do you think people sell it less?
I wonder if people are less keen to sell something they've made themselves than something they've just bought and flipped. Like, I have thought about selling this.
Your Music Weasel.
Because it's kind of expensive. Well, I do like it and use it.
$4,000 for it.
Well, I don't know, but I would feel a bit sort of.
You'll never get another one, will you?
Not like that.
Well, not that specific one.
No.
So does it matter that it's this specific one, or just that you building it was the conduit to you getting one, and you wouldn't get another one if you? It matters that it was yours.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely have a. I also, as you talked about, I have a very kind of love and hate relationship with that one because I had such a nightmare building it and debugging it and getting Finley to fix it, and then and it was all during lockdown. That was a real kind of emotionally, but also I have more than anything else, kind of recently, really kind of learnt it and I understand it much better than I sold my Prophet 6.
Yeah,
which I did have.
Your DX7.
Which is sold my DX7. So I have got. The problem is I literally don't actually have space for another big synthesizer. Quite like one, but I don't know what I'd get though.
I just think you should give your QMMG to me. That's all.
Is that a good?
I think that's the right thing to do.
I was at Elevator when the re-release came out. I was in the shop with Ben while the order. I just happened to be there at 12 o'clock.
Ding,
and it was. I think they did a kind of pre-registration thing. So you signed up.
This is like a clothes shop.
And then
drop.
they kind of picked however many it was out, and then they emailed them. And I think by the time we'd had a cup of tea and gone, they'd all received the email, paid, approved, gone.
Boxes out. Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. I've not thought about whether I feel ownership more for the things that I build, but I don't. I only started consciously thinking about when I turned around and looked at the sort of gutted Atari ST that's in the middle of my studio. You can see in the background of that video where I'm talking about why not to buy things. And like, I just think there's a satisfaction in fettling.
Yeah.
My grandfather used to fettle things. And so it's fettling something.
Why don't you explain what fettling is for the audience?
Is a word for tinkering.
Yeah.
But really it means to fix. To fix.
Is it like fine tuning as well?
Yeah, you could fettle an engine and
Yeah.
possibly fine tune it. But I do.
Because you have the
I
phrase in
interpret-
fine fettle.
Yeah,
that means
fine
like
fettle.
well tuned.
I'm well oiled and tuned and working well.
Yeah.
And to me, like my grandfather's definition of fettling is to fix the thing that is a bit broken. And so,
Yeah.
I have an Atari ST that I received,
Yeah.
and I'm like, it does work, but it does not have a meg of RAM.
Have you recapped it?
No, but I peered at one of the caps. And I did take some advice from circuitbenders.co.uk. I emailed the dude.
Surely your brother knows all about this stuff. Does he fix them?
WSA Matt. Yeah, he does to some extent, but there's an amazing dude, Ben, who's in the area, who's been helping you with his arcade machines.
Right, yeah.
Ben's like a labour of love to like get Tempest and Robotron working. But yeah, like I enjoy the process of the like improvements and the tweaking.
Absolutely.
Just to bring it to concert pitch and spec, because in the case of the Atari, if it's got 512K of RAM, it won't run Cubase, it won't run Notator.
Right, yeah,
and so to run those programs, I have to add some more RAM. And there's a puzzle because you have to open it up and take it apart. And inside you have to discover one of the 40 board revisions that what am I in for? Have I got a good one or a crazy one? Somewhere you have Sims you can drop in.
And you were talking about the community, the people making parts for it now.
It's the same thing as the world of modular synth. The same thing exists for old tech and for old computer games.
But it's different because of the old. It's like when people are still making software for the Commodore 64.
Yes.
I find that absolutely amazing that somebody would commit that level of time and energy to it.
For a dead system. But it's not dead because there's a community of people who still use these things. Like, someone was sending someone was sending me that, like, there's like a Commodore 64 cartridge or whatever it is that can talk to the SID chip and can midify it.
Yes.
So you can just send MIDI into it. It's the same thing that exists for the NES, possibly for the Mega Drive, for the YM chip in there.
It may be that my earlier comment that you're about making music easier and I'm about making it more difficult is possibly not accurate.
I mean, I know
There's the man restoring an Atari ST.
Yeah, but then I'm chasing some sort of like 90s ideal.
But that's definitely more. Your 90s ideal will definitely be more difficult using Ableton, and Ableton will be able to do exactly the same thing.
Yes,
as you know.
Of course you're right. Of course you're right. However, it's about the wetware, and it's about Is it
nostalgia for you? Did you use that at the time?
I did. It is partly nostalgia, and no, I didn't use Ataris, but I had a PC with Cubase 3.
You always wanted an Atari.
No, I didn't even know they existed because I was just that bit too young.
Yeah.
So I was like born early 80s. By the late 90s, I was like 16.
Right.
And then I got into music gear. Right as computers were beginning to ascend to being able to be audio devices.
So how old were you when Rebirth came out?
Was it Rebirth 96 or when was it?
Well, I don't know. I'm assuming you remember it, like when
I had Rebirth.
It's probably actually is about the time when Princess Diana died. It's probably the same sort of
97.
era, actually. Which
Yeah,
was 97. I was working in the Ministry of Sound when that came out, and I remember seeing that and going,
what was the reaction?
I wasn't working with the kind of music people there, but I remember us just going, "This is quite an amazing thing," and it worked on some of the Macs that you use for design and stuff.
Yeah. I was there for that ascension, but the key ascension, the key technological leap, was the ability for your computer to host audio.
Yes,
and to allow you to non-linearly edit audio in the computer. That's the revolution. That's the big deal.
Seeing Acid, you remember that Sony Acid software?
Yeah.
That was kind of pre-Ableton
time stretching
and let you just drop in random samples and pile them on top of each other. That seemed like an absolutely extraordinary business.
I guess the point is and Surin is that a great example of this is there is an ocean of abandoned, fascinating, weird software.
I saw his live show. Yeah. It's incredible.
Well, and he's playing. I didn't see it. It's like, but I know of what he does, and it's like, man, like there's so much niche software.
So I loved it because I saw him earlier in the year when he was doing his Missing Music show. He turns up with 2 old Mac. They were the old kind of aluminium Mac laptops, big chunky ones.
Slightly newer then.
And and takes a projector with him because he wants you to be able to
Show
see
you the
what's
screens.
happening. So massive thing. Then the second time I saw him, he arrived with his workshop system
a chaos
in a
pad.
tote bag, a chaos pad. I was like, that looks a lot easier.
I mean, all credit to him and his creativity
brilliant,
that
yeah.
he can work equally happily with either of those
Yeah.
systems. I will have to talk to him and sort of.
It's really good. You just see this.
There is a plan,
just the
in fact.
sound of them. Yeah.
Because basically, and that is my interest in the Atari, is this fact that there is a lot of old software. There was a lot of the reason,
But it's
basically,
all, as you say, it's all pre-audio though, isn't it?
yes,
it's
there's a
just
lot of
sequencing.
old weird niche MIDI software.
Okay.
And the reason was because it was a simpler time. It was more possible for you as an independent person to create a complete piece of software and to find a market within this small market of it. And now, yes,
These chats again.
I know, and I know it's true. Like, it's true now, and I think it's more so, obviously, infinitely more so true now because you have frameworks
the
like
App
Max
Store
for Live,
and the
you
App
have
Store
stores,
was
and you have the
interesting for
iPad, and really
Yeah.
that is the sort of the modern
Yeah.
equivalent. But I suppose what I'm saying is just like there's an innocence because then there wasn't so much of it. If you were to actually just dip your toe a little bit into the water, like Surin finds, there's tons of shit that you can just get hold
Yeah.
of and download and
And
try.
I think it was
bake your noodle.
I wonder if also it was because it was a more difficult time then to actually make that stuff. I wonder if it was people from a more kind of academic world would do it. I don't know.
It could be.
Because
Yeah,
it's very
definitely.
the stuff I saw him using seems very kind of esoteric. It's very kind of weird. And I remember I guess I started doing music thing just kind of the tail end of that sort of era. And I was obviously very anti kind of plugins and computer software at that stage, or I wasn't really what I was writing about particularly. But you had some very curious bits of software around that were just
Do you think? I think my thought though is it fair to say that as time moves on, we run the risk of becoming more ossified in our definitions of what software can be?
I doubt it. I
Or
think-
do we get freer? This is
I
now your
think it's-
job, isn't it? Your job is to provoke and
I
to
think
open
it
up
is.
minds. So
I think it is generally freer as well because I think the stuff you can do with software now is so much broader. I mean,
because it involves
again, you get-
synthesis and sound. And,
yeah, and
but I
you
suppose-
you get into AI world, you get into literally, draw a line on a graph and write some words in, and somebody
a
sings
new
it.
Taylor Swift album comes out.
And that at the moment is the first idea that comes up is I can make money by writing something where you type lyrics in and it sings it like a pop singer. That's obviously the thing to do. But the ability to do that will become, people will do absolutely ludicrous things with it. I mean, absolutely, undoubtedly, I have not a moment's doubt that they will do incomprehensible things with it. Because why wouldn't they? And it won't be it won't be an academic somewhere. It will just be like, it'll be like what happened with Auto-Tune. Auto-Tune starts out as a sensible way of, cheating in the studio essentially, or saving time in the studio, or making it easier. And then a few years later, you've got, what's his name, Lil Jon, and
Cher.
Cher and all that stuff, and just that whole world of just weirdness that you had for a few years of people making bonkers, rappers making bonkers records with singing on them because they could.
It will take people not gatekeeping and questioning the validity of those things.
No, because they were totally. Presumably, when people, how much gatekeeping do they have when people started, like rappers started putting out records with Auto-Tune singing on it? I'm sure they had an awful lot of gatekeeping.
I'm not so sure. I think.
I'm certain they did.
People loved when Cher's Believe came out. People were like,
But
what
Cher's
is that
Believe
amazing sound?
was the pop version of it. That's a slightly different thing. But like when people like Kanye West or people, I don't know.
I just think
that era, but I'm certain they had enormous backlash.
I'm not so sure. I think people grabbed it with both barrels,
don't know.
both hands, which is great. And but that's what I mean. It's like we can't. the dude who's basically like, you're not allowed to use scape shift because it's you're
But you're
fulfilling
talking-
Tim
but
Excel's
also
vision. It's just like, mate, just get
gate-
on with it and make
gate-
music. Like,
The gatekeeping is YouTube commenters. I mean, yeah,
It is.
Will YouTube commenters say this is a bad thing? Yes, definitely.
okay, yeah, we've
Absolutely, for sure. But will it be weird and also
Yeah, no, you're
hopefully
right.
you and me will look at it and go, "This is terrible. I hate this."
Yeah, and that will make it cool. But, and ultimately, because ultimately, all that will give, only thing that matters is whether the music is good. Like, and do people listen to the music and go, "Holy shit, this is amazing"?
Yeah.
Like that's all that will drive it forward or not.
Yeah.
You know, if that happens, it will, and if it doesn't happen, then people will keep experimenting until it happens.
Yeah,
Well, that's music sorted. So.
yeah.
What else is coming up in?
What else
I mean,
on my
like
list?
we should wind this up, and I'm like,
wind it up,
I'm
yeah.
thinking what your reflections for 25, and perhaps based on something that happened in 24.
Difficult question. That one.
I suppose
No,
I
I
could
think-
ask you I guess you Paul Allen's GTD. Getting things done.
Yeah.
Ultimate question, which I think is an important one to
Yeah.
ask at the end of every meeting,
Yeah.
is what is the concrete next step that you will take on to move this project forward?
So the concrete next step will be, production, making more of them, putting more of them out in the world, and that will happen.
so that more people can
So more people can have them.
music thing.
And so I have some more money to live on, and Thonk have some more money to live on. But then I do think at the same, and then also doing more. There are more of these kind of events planned. So there's the retreat I'm doing
mean
with,
like build
with Disky
workshops
again.
and things?
No, with
Or just
like
like-
so there's
just idea sessions?
one group I'm talking to about getting a bunch of kind of musicians, producers together, give them all one of these, do a kind of day's workshop with these kind of things to do with it, send them away for a week, they can play with it, and then they come back after a week with something they made with it or inspired by it, or totally ignoring it, just making them themselves, and then playing it back. So that for me, something like that would be really exciting and really interesting to just
Wait, did
see.
you say an online one?
No, this would be in person in London.
Because it would be like you could absolutely do an online.
You could
one.
absolutely, and that's
should
what I
do
mean,
like
is
a
that
kind of
that
like
sense
classrooms
of,
of-
yeah, exactly, that sort of thing, and it's just that sort of stuff which takes a little bit of while to sort of set up. The other thing I'm really learning about is how do you do things in the sort of easiest, cheapest way possible. There was a funny that event I did in Manchester, which was literally, my wife was at a conference in Manchester, so we went to Manchester for the weekend. And I just put on Instagram, I'm going to be in this pub with a workshop system on Monday night. Having never been to the pub, I asked somebody who's in Manchester, what's a nice pub? He said this. And I kind of looked at it and thought, that doesn't look too busy. That's probably all right. Put it up on Instagram. And then I was quite nervous on the Monday. I
Not
was
that anyone would show
well,
up.
I was like,
Or that
I was
200
like,
people would show up.
if nobody turns up, that's fine.
You just have a pint. You
Just
pint you in your
fine.
workshop. Make some noise.
If 2 people or more turn up, that's absolutely fine.
Great, yeah.
One person turns up, it's a little bit awkward, but it's fine too. It's actually perfectly fine. I mean,
course
like
it
I said,
is.
I constantly do these things where
personal
I'll meet
ball
somebody in a
chat.
cafe and we'll go and play with it. So I did it, and 2 people who were really nice turned up, and we had a nice
It's
evening.
100% better than mine.
Sitting there, playing with our headphones, talking about the scene in Manchester, talking about what was changing. They were both really interesting. I saw at least one of them at Bristronica, and it's that idea of literally what. And similarly, I did in. I was on holiday in Istanbul. I was just like, who seems to be around in Istanbul? I can't even remember how I found them. Whether I did a shout, definitely did a call out on Instagram. Found somebody, fascinating guy who's a percussionist. He's like a drummer for like big bands, like singers in Turkey. Went around to his studio, met him. He didn't speak much English. His brother did, so we kind of could converse just about. Really interesting, and that, I mean, Turkey's a really interesting kind of music tech or musical instrument world. Like in Istanbul, there are dozens and dozens of music instrument shops.
They make hi-hats there, don't they?
They do have cymbals as well, but they have like stringed instrument shops that just sell 50 types of not quite guitar things that you've never seen from all over the world. Like, these are the Persian ones, these are the Syrian ones, these are the whatever else. And yeah, just this, you felt like compared to London, that's got like 6 guitar shops or whatever in it now.
Yeah.
It was just really exciting, really interesting to go and see. So that sort of very low effort networking, connecting with people, I think is a really powerful,
Well, it is
just really pleasing thing to do.
If you're going to spread the gospel and teach people how to use modular synths, and
but it's
why they
also
might,
listening
then
to people.
You need to go and meet people.
You need to listen to, because like, for me, it's understanding what musicians do, because I don't know, because I'm not really one of them.
This also sounds a lot like what the job you just quit was.
Yes. Yeah.
It seems no coincidence that you are basically applying the same kind of process.
that idea of understanding what people, because a lot of it's also it's not designing the product, because the product's kind of designed. I'm not going to go and rework the product in a dramatically different way, but it's understanding how do you talk about it, how do you explain it to people, how do you introduce it to people, and also that experimental thing, like try something, does that work? Well, that doesn't, so you have to try something slightly different. And like when when I've got more to sell, I move into the point of trying to generate demand. That's like understanding what does make sense and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Which goes back to that beginning when we were talking about that weird AI podcasts. What I genuinely found really interesting in that is it explained what I've been doing for the last year in a really understandable, simple,
digestible way,
mass market way, using ways of explaining that I would never use myself, that I thought were genuine. If you listen to it, it's like 15 minutes long. There's about 2 things in it that I was like, that's not quite right. And it was done by it was Chris from the Discord, the workshop Discord, who did the Advent calendar. He took all the online documentation, which is like about 5 pages of text, like the quick start guide and stuff like that, fed it all into one system and said, right, make a 15-minute podcast.
Google Notebook LM.
Exactly. And I just found that not the
Just to be
AI,
clear here,
not the AI.
It makes a podcast.
It makes a 15-minute podcast with 2 people
human
speaking,
voices, a man and a woman,
perfectly plausible human voices, talking over each other, asking each other questions,
like,
replying. Interrupting each other. But it wasn't that's obviously very magic. That's kind of AI magic. But for me, it was like, it's like, what would it be like if the One Show did a segment about a workshop system? That's what it was like. Yeah. It was like, it's one thing for like us to talk about it, or like Sound on Sound to write about it or whatever. It's what would it be like if somebody could actually explain it to your mum?
This is basically, these are questions I wrestle with as I am on the cusp of making a demo video of your thing. And I now feel a great shoulder of responsibility, because you said the same thing before in your talk at Bristronica. It's like, how can I make this broadly appeal to people so that it is it's more useful to people, that more people discover it. Yeah. And so
also when we do
it will be my job to do that.
We should do a Notebook LLM one and make some video. Put it out the same day as yours. Put tags in and see which one sells the most.
I mean, I have tried the Google Notebook LM thing, and it is upsetting to me how good it is, how passably decent at explaining, and it does touch on the right sorts of points. And I'm like,
I just found amazing how
I would actually
just understandable it was, in the way that when people say to me, "Well, what are you doing?" I really kind of struggle to, like, I can talk to you about it all day long, but when a layperson asks me, I really feel very uncomfortable with it. I feel very like I don't know. I'll talk to my sister and she'll be like, so what do they do with it? And I'm like, well, they make music with them. And she's like, really? And I'm like, not really. Sort of.
It just sounds like you're describing being British.
Well, that is a big part of it. That is definitely that feeling of being shy and British and not wanting to show off. But it's not like I'm deliberately doing it. I would love to be able, and that's why listening to that podcast was so extraordinary, because it was just like,
challenge is
it's just
do
like,
what you...
what if it was like this?
But here's the kicker to get NY sound out of it, Tom.
Exactly.
And that's where it gets it wrong.
And at some point, it makes an AL bum.
But what's actually IN this thing?
Exactly.
Weird.
But that's the only thing when you listen to it that makes you
that's
go,
wrong.
"What the hell is
Like,
this?"
whoa! What did you just say?
And I was amazed. Like, if you're when I've interviewed people and I've been interviewed like in newspapers or magazines or whatever, it's always really painful to read it back, because you're like, "That's not right. That's weird. That's not how it should be." This was, it had, like I said, 2 or 3 things that were very slightly wrong that I was like, "That's not strictly exactly how I would explain it, and it's not quite correct," but definitely no more than you'd get with a journalist who's scanned your website and got a vague idea what it is.
Well, my challenge is to basically make the human version of that.
Yeah,
I do think that is one of my powers. Is
No, it
the
is,
ability
absolutely.
to kind of just think a bit more like, if I didn't know anything about this,
But also-
how would I introduce it?
and also the thing you do is you actually do it for the proper audience. Actually, when you look at something like your No Coast video, which I looked at and kind of analysed when I was thinking about how do I explain this, you're not explaining it to somebody's mum, because you're not, like, actually being on the one show. I mean, it probably would sell you a number of systems, but
You'd have to,
but you'd sell them
simplify to a
because
point.
somebody's mum would ring up their daughter or their son and go, "Oh, I saw this thing that looked interesting."
You'd like this.
Wouldn't be direct. Your audience is actually the people who want this stuff and are going to use it.
But we can't assume knowledge, and that's always the fatal flaw, is like the assumption of knowledge. You have to sort of, if to
you have to
fulfill your
assume
goal
some.
as you see it for
Yeah.
the music thing company, is to broaden it and to make it so that you don't need to understand modular synths to buy this.
But
and
it's
have a good time.
but also the things that people don't only want something that they perfectly understand. When you read a book, particularly when you're young, but anytime you read a book and it gives you a lot of challenging ideas that you don't quite feel comfortable with, and that's why you get value from it. That's why you stop reading famous 5 books and start reading, whatever else, something.
You don't
bigger.
go into like Dostoevsky thinking that
Yeah.
you're going to know everything that's in it before you've read it.
And
Of
the
course.
purpose of picking it up and reading it, and also, let's be honest, the purpose of kind of wandering around it and sitting in a cafe reading it like this so that everyone can see you're reading Dostoevsky, that's all perfectly valid human behavior as well. So it's not like they need to there's no harm in it still being mysterious and interesting, but that's why I'm so interested in those kind of workshops and stuff. It's how people feel confident and happy when they use it, rather than necessarily. They definitely don't need to technically understand it. They definitely don't need to know. This is why this is called this. This is why this does this. But they need to be able to enjoy getting something from it, and they need to be, particularly with your stuff, they need to be inspired when they look at it and go, "I want to do that. I want to pick it up." But it's good. I only have to do the little electron components. You have to do the difficult bit.
Well, wish me luck.
Good luck.
Good luck. Bye. Seventh time's a charm. Thanks, Tom. I am very grateful to you for continually agreeing to allow me to defile your premises and record you talking about anything and everything. And as it has turned out, a great deal of important things. Your working life, like this is a huge thing that I am thinking about constantly as I now celebrate 1 year of like going around the sun as an independent person making videos. I just paid my tax bill. Ow!
So, yeah, please seriously consider sponsoring on Patreon if you can. Although, you've got to pay tax on it. So, hey ho. And I'm grateful, again, enormously to those who do. And for anyone who supports and tells the world about why we bleep. Podcasts are really like... They don't there's a lot of podcasts, and a lot of Gary Lineker's podcasts get advertised on the side of buses and in front of your Amazon Prime video performance playing back. So I don't really have that firepower. So I rely on people to actually just tell the world about this pod. So I'm super grateful. If you can, please tell the world and subscribe, and maybe consider getting on Patreon as we look for a whole year of more pods. Lots of interesting conversations to have with people. There are so many interesting approaches and things going on in the world. And I think it's a very difficult, I've been thinking a lot about the whole world of being a musician. Oh, mate, it's not a good time to be a musician. And I feel for those who are. That is you are playing life on hard mode. But I do also, I think we have to appreciate the fact that ultimately you've just got to do what actually makes you happy. We're earning an enormous ton of money doing something miserable. It's just not going to, it does not make sense. So if you're managing to make a living doing something that you really do enjoy, then I think you are living the good life. Although I may just actually interject and say that I've just been reading 2 books that literally said the same thing, which is that as human beings, we are by design destined to become unsatisfied with everything that we have. And it's through this anti-comfort that humans are destined to experience that we strive. Because it's not useful for a population growth if you're just okay with everything how it is. You need to get bored of everything, always want one more of everything than you have. And apparently this is human nature. I mean, obviously this is what you see when you look at humans and what you feel when you're like, why can't I be happy with all this stuff? Because I have so much more than when I was young. It's by design. All humans do it. So good luck. But this is always going to be a place where I will encourage you to just at least consider doing the thing that you enjoy. And I wonder if you'll take some inspiration from Tom. Interesting, though, to see that really what Tom has done is to basically do the same job that he was doing for a company, but do it for himself, at least for a while, see what happens. I think it's great. Full-time Tom Whitwell, inspiring people to get into modular is just a wonderful thing. That is effectively my own, purpose. I exist in this world to try and inspire people to make music. That's what I'm here to do, in whatever form that takes. So I hope that you are inspired to make music, whether or not it's a career. Very hard. It's very hard. So many things to say, but I think we've said a lot. And there will be more bleeps soon, so I hope you'll stay tuned. Thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.